So, as many of you know, because you follow my streams and we're watching Crazyhouse all the time, Crazyhouse is a variant in which the pieces you capture from your opponent switch colours and enter your pocket, from which they can be placed on the board in subsequent moves. And the only proviso is you can't put the pawns on the first rank or on the 8th rank, but you can put pieces on with check or even checkmate. And if you're familiar with Bughouse, which is played on 2 boards, it's like a one board version of Bughouse. But yeah, well, today what I want to share is something about the history of the game. Well, if you want to know stuff about the history, the place to go is Pritchard's Encyclopedia of Chess Variants. And in chapter 5 of his encyclopedia, he has about variants which involve the introduction of new or captured men during play, which is what Crazyhouse is all about. And if we just scroll down to section 5.2, we get a captured man changes sides and may be reintroduced by its captor. So this is exactly the idea of Crazyhouse. And to be honest, the closest, so here, Crazyhouse is actually this one here, known as Chess Gi, Crazyhouse, Jock Chess, or Mad Mate. So what do we know about its history? Well, probably the earliest kind of variant where a captured man changes sides. Well, in the West, it's something called the double chess game. There's a book called Das Schachspieler, the game of chess, which has lots of information about variants. And on page 91 of that, this was published in 1840, and it refers to Das Doppel-Schachspiel. It refers to volume 3 of the Archive of Games, published in 1821. And there it refers to something called the double chess game. And as Pritchard explains, a captured man may change colour and re-enter the game. But unlike in Crazyhouse, it re-enters the game immediately. So the moment you take a piece, its colour is flipped, and it can be immediately placed on a square on the first rank. And it must be its own square. So a bishop will go to a bishop square, a knight will go to a knight square. If no such square is available, then it can't re-enter the game. And a queen can go either to the queen or to the king square. And the way it was played in practice was that each of the pieces had a little hole drilled into it, and the colour of the piece whose side it was on was somehow flipped. Well, if those people are interested and can make out the German, I'll just slowly scroll through this document, Das Doppel-Schachspiel. And so this dates back at least to 1821. But actually, the idea of a captured man swapping colours exists already in the East, in the Japanese game of Shogi. And it's the idea from the East that comes back to actually brings back the idea of Crazyhouse and the name, and that's why one of the names for Crazyhouse is Chessgi, Chessgi. And we don't quite know exactly when Chessgi was invented. And one of the reasons for that is, it clearly exists in the 70s. It goes by the name of Neo Chess or Mad Mate, and I can show you some of the pieces and who invented it. But there's a guy called Ralph Betzer who played a lot of variant chess, and he claims that he'd played it even as far back as the 60s. So perhaps the game has been invented and reinvented several times. But some concept of pieces switching sides, well, why would they do that? Well, I guess chess is inspired by military strategy. And you could say that if you capture an enemy, then they are annihilated, they are killed. But the idea arose, well, what if you could capture an enemy and they could swap sides and they could fight for you? And that's the concept of Crazyhouse. Now, by the way, just to say something about this, instead of the usual algebraic notation, 53 denotes the 53rd square of the chessboard, moving to the 37th. So the way to calculate what that means is you read the chessboard from left to right, and because they're 8 squares, 53 is 48 plus 5. So therefore it must be the 5th column, and 48 would take into account the first 6 rows. So it's the 7th row and the 5th column. In other words, E2. 37 is 32 plus 5. So in other words, it's the 5th row reading from the top to bottom, and the 4th column. The 5th. 32 plus 5, 5th row and 5th column. So E4. 5th column, 5th row because we're reading from the top, unlike in algebraic notation where we're reading from the bottom. So White played Weiss played E4 to E5, and it turned out. E2 to E4 rather, so just E4 in algebraic notation, and Schwarz played E5. And this is something like knight F3, knight C6. So the 2 is obviously, it's on the top row, it's the second piece on the top row, so now there's the knight, and the knight is coming out to C6. So we see that we can quite easily read this notation, and we also have here some drops in the other column, in the central columns, in the added columns. So that's quite fascinating. The idea of dropping pieces already exists. Okay, but it comes from Shogi, and I'm just going to quickly scroll through this. This shows you the notation of the board before algebraic notation existed. It's very unsatisfactory, but it works. And okay, so if we're looking at the antecedent to Crazyhouse in the West, it's this idea of Doppelschachspieler from 1821. And there's much more in this book called Das Schachspieler from 1840 or earlier, of many other variants of chess like Kriegspiel and so on. And thanks for Granak for helping translate some of this stuff. But it's quite nicely also explained in Pritchard. So what about Shogi? Let me just quickly show you a picture of what a Shogi board looks like. So in fact, Shogi didn't necessarily have this concept of captured men reverse colour until the 16th century. And the idea is if you capture, and it's precisely this idea that maybe if you could capture an enemy, he could start to fight on your side. And the way it works in Shogi is once you capture an enemy, you can turn around the piece 180 degrees, and on subsequent moves place it on the board. Now, unlike in this double chess, where are we now? The double chess game. It's not placed on the board immediately, but at some point subsequently. Okay, so this is Chesky. It says inventor unknown, Ralph Betzer coined the name, adopted by Nost and AISE, reportedly playing it in 1964. But its origins are surely earlier, and we really don't know how much earlier. So there's no need to re-enter a captured man at once. Instead, the captor may hold it in hand. In fact, you're not allowed to enter it at once, and subsequently drop it on a vacant square instead of making a normal move. Except pawns cannot be dropped on the 8th rank, and in normal Crazyhouse, you also have pawns cannot be dropped on the 1st rank. A promoted piece retains its rank. So in modern Crazyhouse, if you take a promoted piece, it does not retain its rank. It reverts to being a pawn. The game is characterized by sharp sacrificial attacks, and so on. And initiative is of great importance. And I'm going to show you this game from Giovan Battista Rizzo from Hetero. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce the Hetero means chess variants, 1981. And then Alex Randolph in 1972 invented Neo chess. So in a way, he reinvented the game. If Ralph Betzer says he played it already in the 60s. And I can show you some pictures. Let's see. So this is a picture of the set created by Alex Randolph in 1972. So these pieces, when you turn them over, they will look like the pieces on the right-hand side. So these pieces are two-sided, and this is the picture of the box in which it came. And Alex Randolph called it Neo chess. So that's quite interesting. And there's also an example of similar such pieces found here called Mad Mate, or found in England at the Exeter Chess Club. And this is a picture from the Exeter Chess Club of these pieces actually being used. And so, yeah, since we're talking about piece sets, so this was a piece set. Let me see. So actually, I have it here. Mad Mate by Alex Randolph, Abacus Spieler. Okay, so this piece set is actually from 1997. And again, if you turn over these wooden cylinders, you get the colours reversed. So again, he re-released his idea. I think it was a very limited release, originally in 1972, and then re-released in 97. And it came in a box like this, and when you open up the box, you can see you can open up the box, you have a little box, and you have the pieces like this. So it's a nice little portable game. Okay, so hi there, Chuck Moulton in the chat, and really appreciate the subscription. 11 months in a row, you're amazing. So what are we going to do? Well, what was very interesting, let's just first play through, this is a game from, let's play through a game from 1980. So this is not going to be totally chronological. So this is a game, Ralph Betzer is supposedly one of the first people to play the game of Crazyhouse. So let's see a game he played as White. And it's not necessarily going to be a good game, because these guys just knew the rules and were just experimenting with it. And it's a game he played against presumably a Paul Cohen, and it was reproduced in the Hetero. I'm not quite sure how you pronounce the Italian of chess, so I'm not going to, but this is the word here, in 1980. So it's Gucci. Okay, so it's Hetero Scaccio, something like that. The double C, I was trying to remember how you pronounce it. Okay, so it all looks very good so far. White developing quickly. But he drops his pawn because he hasn't defended it. And probably the best thing to do in this situation is just to develop, and White would have a huge lead in development at the cost of a pawn. Notice that when you lose a pawn, your opponent not only is a pawn up on the board, but has an extra pawn in his pocket. So he's 2 pawns up, but White would still be better. I like the engine saying plus 2.5. But what White played was Queen e2, d5. Nice. Chess players always love to play developing moves with tempo, especially players like Yasser Saruhan. That move would fills him with delight, as he says. And Ralph Betzer, interestingly, just sacks the piece. I guess to try and get some kind of compensation. He thought he could kick the queen and maybe take this knight. But his opponent, Mr. Cohen, really has an understanding of this game. It's all about counterattack. You don't move the queen, you counterattack the opponent's queen, and you get quite a lot of initiative like that, especially if you could take it with check. So takes, and as a way of moving the queen out of the attack. And yeah, black is doing very nicely here. Knight at f3, bishop at g4, so if he takes the queen, you take his queen. Oh, he gets a bishop back. So white's won a piece, but the initiative is huge. But what Cohen should have played here, which would have been completely crushing, is at f3. Just beginning to undermine the white king side. This is the idea in Crazyhouse. You get in, throw in a check, maybe just come back, and with ideas of going bishop h3, queen g2 mate. Now you could surely defend that particular checkmate, but black has got a huge initiative in this position. Stockfish would say minus 24. But still far from over. But instead, black played bishop d7. He was worried about checks to the king and then picking up the pawn, for example. I mean, he didn't quite... not necessarily, really. I mean, even a knight could block and defend the pawn, but... So just playing... Queen d5 was played, which makes a lot of sense. Putting the queen in the center of the board, hitting a lot of squares. Queen c6, which fails to defend e5. So probably it says queen g4 would have been good. But I'm trying to work out why not just take here. So it's not, yeah. But you can't just go off hunting, as it were, because otherwise knight at h3, king h1, and then you're coming in here. Actually, sorry, not that way, because that gives white choice. This way, so it's checkmate unless he takes back, king g1, and you want to put a rook here, but hang on a second. You don't want to lose your knight, so you swing back here first. If the king goes here, the knight's still covering the checkmate. So you have to go rook on f2 and like this. And if the king goes the other way, you have actually a very classic smothered mating idea. Rook at g1, knight takes, and knight here smothered mate. Okay, so queen g4, actually quite a hard move to see. So I'm going to give that a double exclamation mark. Queen at c6 though was a blunder because it lost the e5 pawn. And again, black probably should have just how can you play this? So when this comes, that takes some guts. Bishop e7, this, yeah, that's not easy to play. And just say I'm going to castle and play this and take advantage. Again, I find that's very hard. A hard move to play. So he played what looks reasonable, just like this. He's afraid of taking with the f-pawn and opening up this diagonal on the king, so it's very reasonable to take with the bishop like this. Takes, but this whole sequence of checks has opened up a weakness in black's position on g7, which he then goes on to exploit. He's hitting both the rook and the pawn, so the pawn falls. He could defend. Well, actually at this point black resigned. This is before people realized that Crazyhouse can swing in quite crazy ways. In fact, if black defends, white wins a piece, so white is a piece up and has much more active pieces. Having said that, the game could have continued with knight d6, preventing pawn at b7 and hitting the queen. Queen has to move, you could win a pawn here. So yeah, white is certainly better, as I say in the notes, with more active pieces as well as being up material. But the game is far from over. So this is one of the early games between Ralph Betzer and Paul Cohen. And yeah, so let me show you some things. So we've seen about das Schachspiele, and we've seen about neo-chess. Okay, so like we said, neo-chess, the pieces are small cylinders, not unlike cotton reels of various heights. Each cylinder has a piece symbol stamped on one end, and the same symbol on the other end in a contrasting colour. The men are placed initially in the normal chess array. When a man is captured, it is turned over. And it says, neo-chess was endorsed by the US Chess Federation and was a great favourite of Edmondson. It was practiced by a number of grandmasters, including Larsen, Spassky and Petrosian. copy of manufacturer's publicity leaflet with manuscript notes apparently deriving from personal communication. So that's nice. Now let's see. Now this is actually what it looked like. The leaflet inside the Neo chess set. So I can read it to you. Neo chess is an absorbing chess variation inspired by shogi. Now, as I said, Alex Randolph was an American, and he was an inventor of hundreds of games, literally hundreds, in his life. And I should open up the wiki page for Alex Randolph. He was born in 1922 and died in 2004. Let's see. There we go. There's a picture of Alex Randolph. And this, by the way, is just from last year. Sam Copeland of chess.com actually created his own Crazyhouse set where the pieces can be turned over. And it's quite a beautiful set of pieces he created. And you can read about it on Reddit. Hopefully you can see the address. So yeah, it says, "Hey everyone, I want to share a physical Crazyhouse set I made with you." And he played a game with it with GM John Ludwig Hammer. So very nice. And he was considering manufacturing this set, although I don't think he went ahead in the end with the plan. So that's very nice. Although there was someone who did go ahead with making a Crazyhouse set also around the same time. And that was someone by the name of, was it Tom Cromwell? And he sent a copy of this set. So this is the board, and these are the pieces. Maybe I should scroll a little bit more slowly so those who are interested could like pause and read. So the mahogany board, some beautiful woodwork. Just need to find a chess set to go with it, and so he designed the following set. So that's the queen. You turn it over, you get a black queen. Okay, and then it shows the chess set in action. So it's an over-the-board Crazyhouse set made of beautiful wood. So if you're interested in that, check out tmcromwell.com. So there are various designs he made, and in fact, Nicholas Theiss played some over-the-board games, in fact, using these sets and against Chucklemind. Very nice. And he even had I mean, this is a very nice video he made, which I hadn't actually had a chance to see. I only discovered it very recently. And you can see he even puts the moves on the board, so you can both see them on the board with the Cromwell pieces, and then on a 2D chessboard. So back to Neo chess. So Neo chess, invented by Randolph. So this is going all the way back to 1972. It wasn't widely distributed, but there are a few copies. So Neo chess, absorbing chess variation inspired by shogi. Okay, so why is it inspired by shogi? So it turned out that Alex Randolph lived in the 1960s in Japan, from 1961 to 1968, and he played shogi. And when he came back he was an American, but he lived the rest of his life in Europe, in Venice, in Italy. And when he came back in 1968, he decided why not cross chess with shogi, and created chess-gi. And the name he used for it is Neo chess. So any captured piece becomes a turncoat, which may be re-entered on the board to fight for its captor. Neo chess has been played and enjoyed by chess players of all ages, from the young novice to the grandmaster. All have found it extremely challenging and easy to learn. And the Neo chessmen can be used in playing chess too. How to play? To play Neo chess, you need a reasonable understanding of the rules and objectives of chess, as the rules are the same for both games, with a few exceptions. The main objective of Neo chess, as in chess, is to checkmate the opposing king. So it shows the pictures of the pieces. and it shows the rules. Except the rule here is not strictly the rule we'll see is actually used in any of the games I found, because he says any captured piece. So captured piece. When a piece is captured, it is removed from the board and turned over. At this point, it changes colour and becomes a part of the captor's reserve forces. On any subsequent turn, the captor may enter the captured piece on any vacant square on the board, except squares in the 8th rank. Now, I've never seen, actually, a game where entering pieces on the 8th rank was not allowed unless they were pawns. So that's interesting. This Neo Chess is slightly different rules from what I've seen from any of these games. Pawn promotion, and now this is actually also a slight difference from Crazyhouse. When a pawn reaches the 8th rank, it may be exchanged from any piece in the opponent's reserve forces. This exchange must take place immediately upon the pawn's reaching the 8th rank. The pawn is placed with the opponent's reserve forces, so you actually steal a piece from the opponent's reserve from his pocket. And the exchange piece takes the pawn's place on the 8th rank. If there are no major pieces in the opponent's reserve forces, then the pawn simply reaches the 8th rank. It remains a pawn. It does not promote. It simply remains in this position for the rest of the game. All other rules are as in chess. So that's what it is. And then what he wrote about it is, he said, Neo Chess is a dramatic game that allows for brilliant combinations and sacrifices. Exchanges are frequent, and players must keep in mind that the one who initiates the exchange will also be the one who will have the first chance to bring the new piece into play. Thus, a player might sacrifice his queen for a knight, and on his next move enter the captured knight to checkmate the opposing king. As in real war, the contingency of fresh troops coming into battle must always be watched for, and the eye must be fixed not only on the pieces held in reserve by the enemy, but on the squares of the board where their entry would be most damaging. Peculiar to Neo Chess is that there is no endgame in the sense of a thinning out of pieces. The board remains crowded to the last, and one cannot judge the state of the game by looking at the board. A second glance, however, may reveal several unusual situations. One player may have 3 knights, while his opponent may have 3 bishops, or there may be defensive pawns on the first rank. Of course, in Crazyhouse that's not allowed, but you might have quadruple pawns or something. Another unique feature of Neo Chess is that there can be no stalemate. Now, that's not strictly true. In theory, a player could lose all his pieces, and the opponent could just muck about and accidentally stalemate him. And again, what is not strictly true, he says there can be no draw except by agreement, and there can be a draw by repetition, which he just hasn't taken into consideration. All games end by checkmate or by resignation, because a checkmate has become inevitable. But as we shall see, no, draws are indeed possible. Okay, so here's the inventor, Alex Randolph. And if we look in the literature, we can find a couple of recent articles. That's Chesky. That's from 2008. We'll come back to this. This is from 1990. That was the picture of the board we saw again. That's the Exeter chess set. That's the pieces they actually play with to this day in Exeter, so they're very proud of their set. This, a little article about Madmate, this is from 1994. Sorry, this is not all in order, because things just get reordered for some reason. Okay. So this is, again, a fairly recent article from 2008. So what we'll do, from all these articles, you can find some very old games. And one of the things you discover was that, in fact, there was an over-the-board tournament in 1980 in London. Where is it spoken about? Well, I'll look at some of the games and then we'll look at some of the articles. There was an over-the-board tournament organised by Raymond Keane and I think Whiteley, and it's Philip Cohen, not Paul Cohen. And some of the games from that tournament can be found. Let me see. Okay, so there's this game here, which I'm going to show you from Hetero by Giambattista Rizzo. And yeah, let me show you some of the games. Let's get to the games. Okay, so this is another game from the 80s. And we can see, I guess, again, e4, e5, bishop c4, knight f6, knight c3, bishop c5. And in a way, they're just bishop to g5. Okay, so actually bishop to g5 falls into a classic opening trap. And so I can't remember who was white. Yeah, so it's not clear who was white and who was black, but the trap is bishop takes f2 check, which is already uncomfortable. It's sacking a bishop for a pawn, but the white king gets very exposed. But actually here it's more than just sacking a piece for a pawn. There's a very strong follow-up. And the follow-up is knight g4 check. And the point is if the king were to move, like this, you're winning your piece back. So black is up a pawn, and the white king is a little bit unsafe. So it's really not a very nice situation to be in. What actually happened in this game is white decided he didn't want to be down a pawn, so he took the knight, and he took the queen, and he's probably thinking, it's quite a reasonable thought, my knight is defending any queen drop, and I'm actually threatening mate in one. But there's a very brilliant move for black in this position. It's at e3. And the point is that if you take on e3, queen at f4 is checkmate. And if you drop back to f1, that's very clear. Queen at f2 is checkmate. If you drop back to here, queen f2 is still checkmate, because the bishop is cutting off the king. So the only square you've got left is here, but then you have queen f4 check. The king looks like it might be getting away a little bit, but bishop f5 check. The square is cut off, so it has to go here, and then the queen comes in and delivers checkmate. So it's a very nice example of an 11-move game, which actually illustrates some of the attacking potential of Crazyhouse. So because of the exchange of queens, already white is mated. Okay, so the next game I want to show you is between Alex Randolph and David Pritchard. Now, Alex Randolph, remember, is the inventor of the game, at least a more modern version of the game as we know it, in the 70s, and David Pritchard is the author of the Encyclopedia of Chess Variants. So who's gonna do better between these two? Okay, so Alex played e4, e5. A lot of these early games were played by correspondence, and it's quite interesting how. So some of these games I'm going to show you later were played by correspondence. Knight d4. So Pritchard said it would be bad to allow the exchange of bishop for knight. So this is clearly at a time when they thought knights are more valuable. Modern theory would say that's not really true, because it is true a knight's check can't be blocked. But bishops have a power. They're long-range pieces. They can attack as well as defend. This bishop can have an eye towards the king while also protecting your own king. So c4 was played. Probably just good here was just to take back and castle, and white can just claim he's got rid of black's only active piece and has quite a nice lead in development. But c4, I mean, any modern player would be horrified because you've just created a weakness. On c2, black ever gets a pawn at c2 is a threat. c6. So indeed I said better for black might have been knight f3, queen takes f3, and you got your knight for c2, and you get to pick up a rook. And this is why actually Crazyhouse players are always very wary of pushing c pawns. But nope, c4, c6, they're going to push their c pawns. Knight takes, e takes, and then he moves his bishop. And I was saying here, you could even just go straight here. Was I really meaning that? I'm not quite sure if I meant that. That might have been a typo. So he moves his bishop back, bishop b4. Yeah, so here actually he had an interesting move, just simply dumping his knight. Because you moved the c-pawn, d3 is weak. Dump a piece on d3, and already you're threatening a mate in one. So you have to try and defend, and you've only got, yeah, you could either move your queen out somehow, or defend with a knight here, or a knight here, or a knight here. So knight f3 would be reasonable. Bishop c5, just developing. Bishop c2, king takes f2, king takes f2. So yes, the idea of this bishop c5, this is just a variation, but the idea of the bishop c5 move is actually it's threatening knight takes f2 and a discovery. So this is just a sample line. So it's very hard for white, the point of this move is actually it's very hard for white to kick this knight. And if you can't kick this knight, then it's very hard to develop your queen side. Actually, personally, I'd have been very tempted by knight takes bishop and then use the bishop to attack. But notice the bishop isn't an active piece, whereas this knight's an active piece. If white tries to kick the knight, then you have this little combination: check, and even this, and then take the bishop, and take the knight, and use the knight to attack, and so on. So you get a really good attack going. But knight d3 was missed. Instead, he tried to kick his bishop, and b4, and he's going for some just. And he castles. And black goes queen h4. At this point, Pritchard reckoned he has the initiative. Having said that, he is threatening mate in one. But you have to be careful with bringing your queen out early in Crazyhouse because the opponent can put on pieces attacking that queen. Indeed here. I can't understand why he would not go knight at f3, because it both attacks the queen and defends. Unless bishop takes h2 is working, this is obviously a very strong move. Bishop takes h2, knight takes, and maybe there are dangerous ideas here, like at g3. And I honestly don't know if this is strong or not for black. Engine is not especially impressed. So it takes, and bishop at f5. So the threat here is knight at h3. That's the problem. That's why bishop at f5 to cover. Well, yeah. But instead he played h3. And with that move, black suddenly has a great advantage. But knight at g5. Again, not such an obvious move to see, but the point of this is just put extra pressure on h3, and it's actually really hard to defend this pawn. Okay, black missed this and played knight f6. Knight at f5, trying to kick the queen. This is the point I was saying, of the danger of this queen being out in the open. Knight g3, just trying to block off this battery. It turned out this was kind of powerful, and just blocking it with the pawn. And yeah, your knight, the queen then has to move again. So then you can save your knight. But okay, he did this. I mean, I have a line which is probably not worthwhile, which is just saying that if you try and run, then you're going to get mated, which is not surprising. And if you try and defend like this, well, you're creating a lot of holes in your position. So that's not good. Black would be winning. So knight g3 is reasonable defense. d3. Yeah, knight takes e4 here is very strong. So you're threatening, the knight can't take you because the queen here is checkmate, and so you're just threatening to clear away this defender, this blocker. But okay, instead he played d3, which is quite good in sealing off this diagonal. prevents white ever playing d3. Knight c3, h5. And so black's got a very clear idea, h5, h4, mate on h2. A little bit slow for Crazyhouse. So much faster would have been just knight at h5. Much more direct, but this is going to take one move longer. Queen f3. Well, the exchange of queens is only going to benefit black, because black has got the safer king. So trades queens, h4 comes, e5 trying to block off that dangerous diagonal. Of course the knight can't move. He takes the knight, now he's threatening mate in 1 on h2. So he takes back. Knight t2 check, takes, rook e1. He takes here, again threatening mate, blocks. Check here, takes, blocks. Sacrifices. Knight at f4. Very nice little move. So if the point is, if the white king were to move, you can then go knight at d3 and queen there's checkmate. But if you take it, you clear away the defender for h4. If you step down, queen at g2 is checkmate, so you have to step up. And then, again, a really nice move from black. So Pritchard really converting his advantage. Like many questionable moves in the middle game, but really converting the advantage like a complete pro at g4. And white resigned. The point being that if you take g4, you have queen here check, queen takes pawn checkmate. And what else could you do? Just try and go like this. Queen g2 still. I mean, you can't try and hide behind the pawn because the queen will come and get you. So g4, very, very nice move to finish. In fact, as Stockfish confirms, the most accurate move for black in this position. So Pritchard, he knew his chess. It's written in Encyclopedia of Chess Variants. He wasn't going to be beaten. The inventor of Madmate, as I said, plays against the author of the Encyclopedia of Chess Variants. And Pritchard won. So now we come to 1980, and there's actually an over-the-board tournament using these chess sets, these sets. It's organised in London with just about five famous chess players in London. Now, who are they? And let's see. I'm trying to see if I can find. Yeah, here we go. The Madmate tournament. It took place in 1980, organised by Raymond Keane and Andrew Whiteley. The final scores were Murray Chandler on 3 points, Andrew Whiteley 2, Roger Lancaster 1, and Tim Leaney 0. Here are three more games from this event, published with permission from Games and Puzzles. In Madmate, normal chess rules apply, except that captured men change size and are kept in hand, as in Shogi. A man in hand may be dropped on the board onto any vacant square, discounting as a move. Pawn promotion is only to a man which the opponent has in hand, so that's the difference from Crazyhouse. But note that you can drop on the 8th rank. I've seen a lot of these games, there are plenty of drops on the 8th rank. So although the promotional material says you can't drop on the 8th rank, I've never seen any of these either correspondence games. So the promotional material from NeoChess says it's not allowed, but I think that's just an anomaly. So let's look at some of the games from that 1980 tournament. So Murray Chandler, as we just saw, was the winner of that tournament. Andrew Whiteley, who organised it along with Raymond Keane, came second. So let's have a look at the game between Murray Chandler and Andrew Whiteley. So we're really going back a long way here. If you imagine this is a game played 39 years ago. Okay, so now Chandler at this point is an international master. He would later become a grandmaster, Grandmaster Chandler. He plays e4. Whiteley plays g6. d4, bishop g7. Bishop c4, d6. So a sort of King's Indian approach from black. Knight f3, knight f6, e5. Very good move from Chandler, by the way, e5. because it's looking to trade off a pawn and put a pawn on h6. And yeah, and the knight will be hitting f7 as well. So knight e4, played by Whiteley. So yeah, I said if you were to do something like this, you could actually take on f7 first, then take this pawn and put a pawn on h6. And white is really doing very nicely. It's only a +4, but it just feels beautiful position for white. So a good move from black, knight e4, knight b to d2. It may not be the strongest move, and in fact, if you were to look at the opening database, this position has been in the opening database, but knight b to d2 is actually would be a novelty in this position. Bishop takes f7, by the way, the supposedly best move would also be a novelty. The most popular move in the database was e takes d6, but let's not delete that from there. So knight b to d2 actually makes a lot of sense. Black has only got one active piece. Wouldn't it be nice to trade it off with one of your pieces, in so doing actually developing your bishop? So knight b to d2 is a very logical move. And I just had to say, bishop takes f7 also looked very interesting with at h6 to follow. Bishop f8 castles. I mean, this also looks fairly nice for white. But knight b to d2 is a very logical move, so I have to praise it. Knight takes d2, bishop takes d2, d5. Again, it defends that f7 weakness. Remember, white's got a knight in hand, so things are a little bit more scary on f7. You'd have a knight and a pawn following up. I mean, if you just did a move like h6, for example, you'd have this, and if you were to take it, knight g5, and notice if you were to go here, that extra knight means, okay, and if you were to go here, we can actually force you to go to f8. So knight at d6 would be a big issue. In fact, probably be mating. I was going to say knight takes queen, but Stockfish got other ideas. Stockfish is way too mean to take your queen. But knight takes queen is clearly winning. As I said, Stockfish wants to really persecute you. So I'm going to delete this from the study, but it just shows this is a danger that black is facing. So d5, very good move from black to actually cut out all those threats. Bishop dropped back, bishop g4, so black actually playing very nicely. h3, takes. The problem is white is trading, and the more you're trading, the more this h6 is going to become an issue. Knight at t4, and that probably was a mistake. Knight at g5. So quite interesting here is if you actually just take this knight, you'd be opening up this diagonal. So straight away, actually, this just looks completely losing for black. Although you've given up your queen, you don't even take the queen. This is just a sample variation. You just torture the opponent a bit and only then take the queen. And in the meantime, notice how white is very safe with all these bishops protecting his king. So this is a mistake from black, but white did not capitalize, just going for some more tactical exchanges. The logic of Chandler is I'm going to make exchanges which improve my position. So he did that. Bishop takes, knight t4 again. So it's not clear he's improved his position. Goes bishop at h6, reinforces his bishops. Takes. Okay, so it's not clear black's really made progress, is it? So bishop at h6, you can see is a little bit of a mistake, because what could he have done instead? I mean, Stockfish has all these wonderful ideas of e6 and knight at e6. You know, just let's go at e6 or knight at e6. I mean, that's a fork of the queen and the bishop, so you better want to take it, right? But then this is very uncomfortable already. Bishop takes g6, check. So yeah, this is interesting. And white is doing very well. So that's a weakness that black has not covered. But okay, bishop takes 6, takes, so that's not such a good exchange. Knight d6, again, very good move from black. Also giving extra protection along this diagonal and also hitting white's bishop. Bishop dropped back. c6. Castles, castles. Rook a to d1. Knight d7. And c4. So very clear intentions from white. He simply wants to trade a pawn and put it on h6. Knight b6, he takes the pawn, he puts it on h6, bishop drops back, knight at c3. I mean, often you don't want to drop pieces, if you have plenty of pieces, you don't want to be dropping them on the queen side. But there is a logic to that move, because black has a threat, which is bishop at e4, and starting a big attack of his own. So knight at c3 is actually in a way a defensive move. But actually better, and just for that exact reason, is knight at g3, because it covers the same square, but it has more attacking inclination. So I'd say knight at g3 is just a slight improvement. At e4 came anyway. Queen to g3. So another potential line would have been actually. Now this is actually pretty hard to see. This looks as if, 3 pieces in the way, looks completely closed, but it's not. You go knight takes e4, pawn takes, you can actually sack your queen and take this knight. That knight actually becomes a liability. It seems like you've just lost a whole queen, but you've got huge attack on the king. It's very white might play a move like this to try and get out of trouble. Okay, so that means you take, but you have quite a lot of pieces in hand, and this g7 is a big weakness. And Chuck Walton says, knight at c3 at least attacks d5. Maybe that is the logic. True, but d5, that's true. Now there are 3 attackers on d5. Yes, that is true. And only 2 defenders. Okay, good point. So this move is not only attacking, it's also defending d5. So very nice move. And I guess that's the reason why g3 is better. Is this something is landing on e4, so there's not going to be enough threat on d5. The queen moves. Now, whenever the queen and the king are like this, you have to always be wary of a knight checking the king and the queen. Rook c8 came, and it's very clear what black's intentions are. Black's really played this quite well. I mean, ignore the engine saying +8. He's got lots of good ideas. Takes queen. Of course, we know that Murray Chandler as white is going to win this, but you have to give him some credit that despite this weakness on g7, he's played some nice moves. Knight at h5. So quite creative from white. Also, just to say, knight. This idea is still interesting, but okay. Knight at h5. Black played queen to d7, and this knight at h5. Hang on a second. Yes. So why didn't he follow up with exactly his plan? I'm not quite sure, because he gets his queen, and he's not doing so badly. He must have been scared that knight h5 was threatening something. So what's he scared of? Okay, so he moved his queen, and I'm still trying to see why. Why did he do this? I see. He's afraid of this sack. Okay. So that sack should have been played immediately, maybe. But okay. Unless I made a mistake. This is true. He takes, and takes. So that's why. Queen takes was obviously slightly stronger here. But pawn takes. So you get a bit of weakness around the king at g7. The problem is this is a potential square that white can attack, whereas it wasn't when there was a pawn there. At g7 came rook f5 and knight f4. He's just trying to hit these squares. I mean, it turns out it's not a very good move at all. Now, you have to ignore Stockfish saying g takes h8 equals queen, because remember they were playing by rules that if you take on h8, you have to promote one of the pieces in the opponent's pocket. So g takes h8 is queen is actually not a legal move. So knight f5 was played. So, and in fact, there's a certain logic that you could maybe sacrifice your queen because then you can promote to queen. It's a sort of interesting idea. So anyway, he took and promoted to bishop. So you have to remember that now black doesn't actually have that bishop, even though it says he does. So takes, rook takes, bishop takes, knight e2 check, and black gets this check in and wins his queen. So really nice. F takes, and knight at f5. So trying to cover the weakness on g7. Bishop g7 came, so he's just hoping probably to put a rook on the back rank. He takes. Yeah, and this is probably not the best. Takes. So the problem with taking is, and this is actually a good general principle in Crazyhouse, if you take along your weaknesses, it just gives your opponent more pieces in hand, and in particular this means now the weakness is not only on h8 but also on h6. So knight drops on h6 suddenly become a danger when they were never a danger in this position. In this position you've got huge problems on h8. h8 is your huge weakness. But by taking you create a bigger problem on h6 as well. And king takes g7 came. Rook at f7. So again, very creative from Chandler. A little bit of a bluff in a way. That if you take this rook, bad things are coming for you. In fact, taking the rook is not the end of the world. Just as an example, we could have knight g5 check, king g8, bishop here check, king h8, bishop takes pawn. So this is very unpleasant, certainly, for black. But as an example of this Crazyhouse game can turn very quickly. Imagine you played a move like rook c2. Knight f7 check, king g8, knight d8. Oh, so what I wanted to say here, and suppose, so white's just played this, attacking your queen, and you play rook c2. And suppose you were to take this queen. Well, actually, suddenly, black has got checkmate. Actually, maybe not. Like, you can't go bishop at f3. So there's a slight error in this notation. But it's just good to give the idea. Bishop f3, takes, pawn here, promote to knight, which you can do because he's got a knight in hand. Rook here, check, and then rook there, checkmate. That's if he goes to h1. If he goes to h2 straight away, there's rook g2 here. You sack your queen for a rook, and then you put the rook here. It's going to be checkmate. So there's a way of breaking in, is the point, with rook takes g2. If you take the queen. Rook takes g2 and you can break in. It's a slightly subtle way of breaking in. So, but of course, white can mate just by going knight f7, discover check, bringing the bishop in and bringing the rooks checkmate. That's sort of an example line. So white can find actually a forced mate after rook c2, but has to be careful. Can't just grab the material. So that's what would have happened if he took the rook. But in the game, Andrew Whiteley probably thought his opponent had calculated something in that eventuality, and so just tried to escape. But unfortunately, that runs into mate in 2. Bishop at g7, and black resigned. And of course, he resigned because after king here, white has knight here, checkmate. Very cute little move, defends the rook and delivers checkmate. So that's how Murray Chandler won the tournament, because that's how he won Andrew Whiteley, who'd beaten everyone else. he won the head-to-head against Whiteley. Although it could be criticised that he had white. So this is the game Chandler against Leaney, or rather Leaney is white against Chandler. So he's black. He won this game, and Leaney played looking like a wolf defense as white. E5, Queen E2. Now Queen E2 is a really bad move because already you've played a very passive opening. And then on top of that, you're not developing your light squared bishop. But as we'll see, his logic is he wants to go here or here, and then castle queenside. But still, it's not a good move because this bishop is just out of the game. Bishop d6, knight c3, bishop e6, so a classic kind of Jan Lee setup from Chandler, with the bishops and knights all nicely developed. Castles, castles, h4, d4, and yeah, good intentions from white. I'm going to come and attack you. The problem is d4, and black's attack is just faster. You know, these bishops are just staring straight into this white kingside. This attack is coming faster. E takes d4. Well, again, this is... I have to question whether this exchange benefits white or black. Knight e4. Yeah, knight b5 could say is slightly stronger because it has an eye on a3. Turned out Chandler didn't even see what any bughouse player would play immediately, which is at a3. Instead, he grabbed the pawn on a2, which is very, very questionable, and white started to counterattack at h6. And again, black's best move is to just go at a3. And it is completely crushing. Instead, he was worried about this undermining the knight because there's a lot of pressure on this pin, and he started defending. Yeah, so not so great. H takes g7, and he played a second blunder in a row. Again, probably the best move for black is just to go straight in with the counterattack. But no, he took. Brave move. And here white is completely winning. The strategy for white is just trade everything on f6 and the king is out in the open. Trade everything, and you have all the pieces to attack with because the black king is in the open. So bishop takes f6, takes, knight h5 would be just one example. So white is completely winning. But instead white played queen d2, slow move. And it prompted black to get his act together at c3, hitting the queen and hitting b2. Bishop h6 check. And again, Chandler didn't play a very good move here. He played king h8, king g8, and the king is actually relatively safe. King h8 means he's in some trouble. So it turns out at g7 is not good for white because you could just go here, and you might say it just takes here, but just bishop takes, and black is actually completely fine here. So at g7 is actually a mistake. But the move white would have had was queen g5, threatening at g7 next move. And queen g5 was played. At d2 check. And here's a critical move. Apparently white needs to play knight f takes d2. C takes d2, rook takes d2, and white will be just completely crushing here, apparently. I mean, so it's very hard. How do we defend this? I mean, we go rook. If we go rook here, it just doesn't work. Basically, we just drop a pawn, takes, and checkmates. Just how do we defend? It's just almost impossible. I guess the only defense is to drop a knight blocking g6, but still at g7 comes, and this is just really bad. Of course, we wouldn't be promoting to queen, something worth noticing. So it's not as bad as it could be. But okay, so queen g5 came, but he took with rook. And the reason why taking with rook is bad is because, hang on a second, he was being very cunning here. That's what I just realised. He wanted black to take his rook, because then black would have a rook in hand. Means he could take here and take, promoting to rook at some point in the future. And white's attack would be much more powerful if he had a rook in hand. So rook takes d2 was actually quite a cunning little move from white. And black played at g6. Turns out you can take the rook, but the point being it's with check, and white doesn't actually have time to attack. So takes back, you come up with a check on the back rank, takes, you check here, and the point is you're just taking the queen if you take the knight. King e2, knight c3, check, check. Sorry, just to explain, if in this position, if you take the knight, we're taking the queen with check, then we're going to have a queen in hand. So you definitely can't take that knight. Takes, takes, let's take away that, takes, takes here, and that would be checkmate. So some kind of very furious attack would follow if the knight takes. If the king takes, it's not much better, knight takes, and again there's this huge threat. King gets out of the way, you take the queen anyway, now you're threatening not exactly that, but something. King g8, takes, takes. So white could try this little trick of rook h8 here, pawn here. But actually he doesn't have enough in hand, the bishop covers everything. Pawn here is a nice idea, the knight covers. Pawn here, bishop covers. So everything is covered. And this is just a sample line. Black just has too much and it's mating. So c takes d2 was the correct move. But instead he goes at g6, defending. At g7 came, good move, king g8. He doesn't want to take the rook because actually you can't promote to anything at the moment. So he took the pawn. White had this idea, knight takes, takes, bishop takes queen. The problem with this is it means white can now promote to queen whenever he wants to, which he did. Queen takes. And but actually white is busted. So how did white get so busted? So this move was a mistake, b takes c3. So in fact, yes, this is the thing. This is it. Okay. At g6, g7 is good. But now the critical move for white here is just take this knight. It's a free piece. Now why is it a free piece? Because if you take the queen, you can take here, promote to queen, because he has a queen in hand. He takes back, but then this bishop can then be taken. Knight takes bishop. King h8. And now we see what's coming. We've got a bishop in hand, we're going to pick up. Bishop at g7, we're going to be picking up the queen, and so on. Why is that not the line I gave? I said, okay, throw in a check first, throw in another check, and then take the queen. It's the same thing is going to happen. This comes with check, you pick up the queen with check, and you end up getting mated. So queen takes f6, it was the bishop can't afford to take you, because this knight comes in with check. Later, so with an intermezzo, takes here, then takes here. So queen takes knight, very nice move. But that was missed. Instead he took here, and black got out of the danger. Takes, takes. He took the queen, which means he can promote to queen. But now there's nothing, actually. He has to defend, because queen here is a mate threat. And in the game, what he did is he actually defended by putting a pawn on b1. But on lichess, I'm not able to drop a pawn on b1, so we just have to imagine for a second that's a pawn. And we have at b2. So now Chandler played at b2, and black is mating. And in fact, it's from this game that I know that pieces were allowed to be dropped on the back rank, because both players in the subsequent continuation of the game did drop white dropped on black's 8th rank, and white dropped on white's 1st rank. So they were not playing by the neo-chess rules; they were playing by the rules as we understand them, that you can drop anywhere on the board, just not pawns on the 8th rank. So pawn b2. The idea is if you don't take the pawn, then queen here check, and knight here is checkmate. And if you do take the pawn, then knight check. Can the king run up? Queen is cutting off here, the bishop is cutting off here. King takes bishop, queen here is checkmate. So you try and run back, drop the queen, take the knight. You got it. And oh yeah, very nice. You just take that. He only has a rook to block, you take it. Oh, but in the real game he could have blocked with a pawn. So not as clear. So in normal Crazyhouse, blocking with the rook is forced, and then you can just take, and here's checkmate. Something that just occurred to me is well, it didn't happen like this, but queen here check, queen takes knight. In the game they were playing, he could have dropped a pawn. And that makes the mate a little more difficult, but not much more difficult, because then you have knight takes pawn, check, king goes back here, queen here, check, and you could drop with another pawn or something. And then bishop takes rook, check, knight takes, and then you could go queen takes pawn, and that would be checkmate. Yeah, the knight would be defending. Yeah, so that would be mate anyway. So nice. We calculated the mate even with the pawn drop. So pawn drop, knight takes pawn, king here, queen takes pawn. Oh, but then he could block with the rook. Yeah, that's fine. We just take the rook here. He can take back with the bishop or with the knight, but the problem is he can't defend this rook, which so queen takes rook is then checkmate. I think that works. Yeah, very nice. Okay, so what actually happened in the game was something much more mundane like this. So that was how Chandler defeated Tim Leaney. So also in that tournament we had Tim Leaney against Roger Lancaster. If we actually see the thing, Tim Leaney ended up with 0. He played a very nice game there, but almost beat Chandler, but he turned out he lost to Roger Lancaster as well. And let's just go a little bit faster with this one. So Roger Lancaster is black. D5 to try and defend his f7 square. Takes the bishop, takes the knight. Okay, so he's trying to get the scholar's mate going. Black's not going to fall for that one. So black seems to have actually stabilized his position quite nicely. So white, after white's initial attacks, notice players playing on the queen side, like this is not how you play Crazyhouse. And actually, the story of this game is actually all about the light squares around the white king. So here, in fact, just g4, and black would be completely crashing. G4 and this. It's just very hard to come back from this. If you don't take this knight, it's winning a rook. If you do take it, your king side is becoming completely exposed with another knight landing on h3 and so on. So g4, really powerful. Rook e8 was played, however, in the game. a4, white's just not really realizing the danger. And g4 came a move later. Knight e4, takes f3, and this is just a disaster. Queen b3, again. Takes here, hits the queen again, hits the queen again, comes in, wins the queen, and delivers checkmate. An utter crush from black, and it all just came from that g4 move. So it's a very instructive game, actually. Yeah, so hope you're enjoying this. These are the games from this 1980 Over the Board tournament, organised, as I said, by Whiteley and Raymond Keane. So The last game I want to show you from that tournament, the last game we have, which is printed, is Andrew Whiteley as white against Roger Lancaster, the guy who just demolished that, poor Tim Leaney in that previous game. Himself got beaten in this one by Andrew Whiteley, and we see it's a French defence. At d5, knight c3, bishop b4, bishop d3, c5. And it's quite funny because in some of the commentaries on these games, they write stuff like c5 exclamation mark, whereas any modern Crazyhouse player would go like c5 mistake dubious. So they really thought this is great. We're going to exchange pawns. We're going to attack. We're going to take control of the centre. They didn't quite appreciate the weaknesses on c7, d6 you're creating with this move. Bishop e3. So actually the strongest move for white here is actually this, threatening just an immediate queen takes g7 and causing mayhem. So if c takes d4, actually queen takes first, hitting the bishop and the pawn. Black's best move is actually bishop f8. Wonderful. Wonderful black development with all these pieces stuck in their original positions. Quite nice picture. Of course black could, as a human being, do something like this. But then what you do is you take with the queen, and again you have a fork. You're threatening a pawn at c7 as well as taking on g7. Pretty hard to defend both. So queen g4, powerful move. You don't necessarily have to go for g7 immediately. You can take here and then the threats still remain. But okay, bishop e3 was played by Andrew Whiteley. c4, bishop backs off, knight f6, bishop f3, rerouting the bishop. Actually not such a bad idea. Queen a5, knight e2, b5. Very nice play, really. Very logical play. Bishop takes e3, b takes e3. Now here, this is a sign. I really feel Andrew Whiteley understood the idea of Crazyhouse. With this, we saw in his Chandler's game as well, which he was unlucky to lose. He's keeping his pieces around his king. He doesn't want to move his knight, even though in chess you might take with a knight. No, we're going to have nice control of the centre, and we're going to keep the pieces near our king. So, and in the meantime, all these trades also are good for white, because white's got a lot of weaknesses he can attack. Knight b d7, g4. Okay, I said he understood Crazyhouse. Maybe I was wrong. So I mean the right idea. Just go straight. He wanted to go g4, g5, but just you have a pawn in hand, use it at g5. Very good move. But instead he goes g4, knight b6, g5. And maybe he thought, well, my bishop's defending g2. Why not just use the pawn I have, and maybe then I can use my pawn in hand for h6 or something. Fair enough. But not the strongest. Because obviously h3 is a weakness, and this could have been punished, potentially. Rook here, knight h4 again. Black is just playing moves on the wrong side of the board. It's a very easy way to lose games. So you just play on the wrong side of the board. He thinks he's winning a pawn, and all he's doing is trading pieces. Oof. And here, yeah, really smart from Andrew Whiteley. He doesn't even take the rook. He goes, I'm just going to take this pawn and threaten checkmate on e8. Now, apparently knight takes rook is actually good, but that's sort of slightly concerning, isn't it? Losing that bishop, but apparently you can just you can throw in some checks, and you don't even take the knight. You just throw in some checks, and then very hard to defend that bishop. So that would be actually a way of, and then you take the knight. You're all safe. Okay, but that's quite hard to see. So the way he played it, bishop takes, it's quite nice, but you are losing that bishop. King f1, knight takes f4 happen in the game, and then he takes the rook. But this is the threat. He's threatening mate. Knight d2 was played, and that's not a good move from black, because white can just sack his queen. The queen can't be taken back because of the mate threat. And yeah, now it's just curtains. Defends. The point is, if bishop takes g2, actually this bishop is defending and come all the way back. and white just doesn't have enough to follow up anyway. G6 was played. It's not. It gives a luft for the king, but only for one move, and it was all over. Okay, so that gives you a flavour of the game as it was played 39 years ago. As you can see, the players are playing at a kind of 1700, 1600, being charitable level. They're very good when it comes to calculating mates, but they didn't have the positional understanding, and they're playing on the wrong side of the board, like chasing for pawns on the queen side and such like. Not quite playing the sharp moves. So let me just show you a few more sites. The chessvariance.com says that the game was played on NOST and AISE and was introduced by Ralph Betzer. And it gives some of the names: Drop Chess, Mad Mate, Schizo Chess, Neo Chess. And it just repeats what I was saying about how Pritchard states that some of these great names were playing the game. And also, the Chess-Gi can be played online on Muis, an internet chess server dedicated to chess variants. And it explained how to do it and the rules. Now, actually, the website which has a lot about the history, which I should have told you about much sooner, is this one by crazymaharaja.dreamwidth.org. And so this was his first version of the history of Crazyhouse, with a quite fantastic image. And there he cites this Pritchard, which I was showing you. It's called ZH, I should say, because of the Z from crazy and H. So there's some information which has been collected here. And Ralph Betzer is considered as one of the inventors, but as I said, Pritchard says that he played it, but doesn't say who invented it. And there's also an article on Crazyhouse by Nick Long, and that's more about some of the more recent play on Muis, the server, the Mid-East Wild Internet server. Says, prior to Muis, there wasn't an automated way to play Crazyhouse on an ICS server. You could play an odd game of Bughouse with each player logging into the ICS twice, or actually using a strange chess engine. Anyway, so stuff about a Swedish internet chess server. Okay, so that's some information there. About Nick Long, by the way, and I'm going to come back to this in a second. So Nick Long has got a new website called chronotog.com. It's mainly focused on atomic chess, but on that site you get, for example, an interview with Knežević, and you have so go ICS interviews. Click on that. I seem to have lost it. You also have an interview with G. Rogers, who at the time of the interview, in 2011, had 90,000 games of Crazyhouse on Fix, mostly 1-0 games. By the time he'd finished, I think it was 120,000 odd, and he has a good number on Lichess as well. So he's one of the players who's played the most games of Crazyhouse. So there you go. So some correspondence players from at least the 1960s, and it was known then as Chess-Gi. So there we go. So information on the Chronotog website. I'll just close those down. About, but the site which probably actually initiated a lot of everything I'm saying to you now is actually this is actually Crazy Maharaja, who is always very passionate about discovering the history of Crazyhouse. And if I go to, let's see, not this one, that's about Bughouse. There we go, the second history of Crazyhouse. And this is the discussion of, well, maybe the inventor was Alex Randolph. Although Alex Randolph did invent it, he invented it in the 1970s, so apparently it may have been invented earlier. So here's some links to lots of stuff about the history of chess, they're very useful links if you're interested. And here are links to the study which I created, because this blog was probably prompted by discussions with myself and my own correspondence with Raymond Keane, which actually led to me telling him that Alex Randolph was the creator. But then he still doubts that because, as I said, there's some evidence that maybe it was played even as early as the 60s. But we're going to come back to Alex Randolph. Very interesting character. As I said, he lived to the ripe old age of 80 something, 82 or something, in Venice. Invented a lot of games. There's an interview of him with Leo Colovini, another inventor, where he talks about. He also was a spy in the Second World War. There's a biography of him in German. So yeah, there's lots of links you can find on this site. The English is not as well written as it might be, but there's definitely a lot of information which I can recommend to you. And as I said, there are also these links to these studies which I've actually created myself. And there you go, that's a picture of the man, which I showed to you. So this is the interview with Leo Colovini, where he writes, ever since I was a kid, I loved changing the games I had and creating new ones, but it was just a hobby. I never thought it would become a job. Then one day, a middle-aged American gentleman, who was a member of my chess club, at that time I was about 10 or so, taught us to play Mad Mate, a cross between Western chess and Japanese chess. And so because he was only about 10, this shows that Alex Randolph had it invented around 1969 or 1970, if you look up Leo Colovini's birthday. His name was Alex Randolph. I had the great good fortune to meet the world's most senior game designer, the one who invented the very concept of game author. It was as if an aspiring filmmaker met Spielberg or a musician met Peter Gabriel, so I began to go to his studio as a play tester, but then little by little I also began to show him my ideas. And he encouraged me, sensing that in the confusion typical of a 10-year-old child, a propensity for that career was hiding. In 1986, several years later, we published together Drachenfels, and 2 years later, Incognito. Yeah, so that's about Colovini. Okay, I'm going to close down some of these links. So you can see from the stills, that's Alex Randolph. This is something about him in Spanish. Yeah, interesting character. Okay, and the number of games he invented is just phenomenal. I'm probably scrolling too quickly, but if you want to look it up, you're going to have to type in the links. I'm just going to close it down. There's the Wikipedia page. He moved to Japan in 1961, and then he came back to Venice about 1968. And he established this company with De Toffoli and Leo Colovini. Very nice. And there's another interview with, so not interview, article about him in French. So, who is Alex Randolph? He was born in Arizona in 1922. So yeah, he's the one who, maybe he's not the one who invented Crazyhouse, but he certainly reinvented it, and maybe it's not invented according to the current rules, so then it's very uncertain exactly. Okay, that's a picture of the Exeter, in Exeter, of the chess set, from the Exeter Chess Club, they actually play to this day using these pieces that he created. This is again the Sam Copeland pieces, and these are the ones by Tim Cromwell, or TM Cromwell, which Jan Lee tried out and actually tried out and showcased on their YouTube. Of course, if you want to know about the modern history of Crazyhouse, then you should check out Jan Lee's YouTube, and there's an interview with Jan Lee by Krosky. That's a very interesting read. He was known as Tan the Man on Fix because his name is Justin Tan. Tan is his surname. And yeah, that's a good read. You can either pause or if you're a speed reader, this is fast enough for you. But yeah, just check out. I don't know. I can't put all these links in the video because I'm closing them down, unfortunately. That's what I should have done, just given you the links in the video. Okay, so I recommend reading. This is a good interview with him. There's an interview with G. Rogers on the Chronotog site, and yeah, let's get on to some more of this historical stuff. Okay. Oops. I accidentally closed what I didn't mean to close. File, open recent. I just opened. Okay, I think it didn't matter which one it was. Okay, so Chesky. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is some more games, which I found here. Some more old games. Philip Cohen annotated some games. You can ignore a lot of the annotations because a lot of it is wrong. But of course, that's not surprising because the authors are not familiar with the game. So there are a couple of articles on Chesky. One's called In the Library Chesky from Variant Chess 58. Another's called In the Library Chesky 2 from Variant Chess 59. And so there's some more games in there. And yeah, why not? I can show you some of these games. And there's also something from 1990 by Paul Novak. Another article. Okay. Let me show you some more of these games. So let's get back. Oh yeah, this is just saying I've just set up an Instagram if you're interested in Crazyhouse. But this will be much more about mating ideas, and also I have a blog about Crazyhouse. So I'll come back and talk about that more. But that's all the modern game. If you want to know more about the modern game, I'd say the best thing to do is check out Jan Lee's YouTube channel. Here, Jan Lee Crazyhouse. Actually, the first Crazyhouse streamer was in fact Nicholas Atrophied, here, the one who's trialing out this, who's trying out the set here, and you can, his name, sorry, Nicholas Thice. That's his YouTube. But Jan Lee very quickly started streaming Crazyhouse, and he was the best Crazyhouse player of the generation for about 20 years. Perhaps now overtaken by international master Opper Wazen from Holland. And he's got hundreds of videos on Crazyhouse, so check that out if you want to see, because that gives you all of the modern history. For example, when Lichess first introduced Crazyhouse, there were bit chess tournaments, there were Crazyhouse Revolution tournaments organised by Fishy Vishy, and then there was a Crazyhouse World Championship. And they were going into the kind of the modern era, and for the Crazyhouse World Championship, I can recommend my own blog, zhchess.blogspot.com. If you click on Crazyhouse World Championship, that will give you a lot of the recent history of the 2018 Crazyhouse World Championship. That's a really good resource just for the 2018 World Championship. For 2019, you'd have to dig a bit more inside the blog. But there's other stuff about more recent history in the blog. And then the Crazyhouse League and other initiatives, Crazyhouse 960, 12-Teen and Jan Lee Against the World, lots of more recent stuff. But we want to go back to the historical stuff, because that's what this stream is about. So it's true that the quality of these games is not necessarily going to be there. These aren't necessarily top-class chess players. And they're just experimenting with a variant which was completely new to them. Unlike G. Rogers with 100,000 games under his belt, these guys are literally playing correspondence games for the first time ever. Okay, so this is a game between Murphy and Novak. And we see black playing quite passively and going d5. And this is a mistake because g6 is weak, because he's played h6. So trades are going to benefit white. White's developed, and g6 is going to be a real problem. White didn't quite take advantage. I mean, a simple way of taking advantage is just e takes d5, takes, and g6. It may not be the very best move, but it's just a very obvious way of continuing. Okay, in fact, he played knight c3, d takes c4, bishop takes c4, Knight b to d7, e5. Actually quite nice. I mean, a stronger idea is at d5, because e6 is the weak square in this position. That's what needs to be targeted to get in along this diagonal. But d5 is quite nice. We'll see exactly what he wanted with at e5. At e5, this is a bit of a mistake, like knight g4 is a bit stronger. But here, it creates a tempo on g6 by doing this. Okay, and now he gets in d5. And d5 is like the winning move in this position. At g4, knight d4. In fact, it's strong enough that you can just go straight in. And we just need a knight for checkmate, so we just take it. We hunt for the piece, and then it's checkmate. So this would have been much stronger. If something like this would be a defense, just blocking off the defense of that pawn, but then we have this check winning the queen. So it's real trouble. You can even just sack the queen here to draw the king out, and this is checkmate. So d takes e6, very powerful. But he didn't spot that, so he went knight d4, knight takes e5, oof, bishop b5 check. Again, d takes e6 was strong. King f8, bishop f4, hitting the knight, knight g6. Quite good, undermine the defender of the pawn, queen takes. He thought he was getting a fork, but knight e6 check came. In fact, either of these moves, queen takes knight, knight e6, in either order, it's very powerful. Knight e6, you take it, queen takes g6, and in this position, black resigned. And I'd say resigning is premature. And in fact, it said black resigned, but then I read it in another place and he didn't resign. This game continued. So that's incorrect. E takes f. Or did he resign? No, he didn't resign yet. See, I discovered the full game somewhere else. So e takes f4 happened. And I was saying actually knight at h4 could have been a continuation for black. Knight at h4, so this would be a possible continuation. Queen takes pawn, then he takes the bishop, here check, gives up the queen, knight g5, at f7. And I was saying the dilemma for black is that he cannot take the white queen without enabling white to promote to queen. So this is the thing, if you ever take the queen, remember the rule is you can promote to queen then, if white has a queen in hand. So you can put the queen there. Oh, he doesn't have a queen in hand anymore. Sorry, I meant, yeah. It's because black has got a queen. White can promote to queen, that's what I meant, sorry. Yeah, black's got a queen, and by losing your queen, you're actually enabling your own pawn to promote to queen. And that just means you're mating, just checkmate. So this would have been a possible continuation. Okay, the way it actually continued was e takes f4 first. D takes e6. Okay, this is just, it's looking quite ugly. For black, knight g5, knight at d7. So we're winning the queen. Okay, and this is a humongous mistake. Bishop takes d7. It turns out e takes d7 and you're completely fine. Why? That's just such a minor thing. Okay, so apparently after bishop takes d7, black has knight at h3. And the fact that you're not controlling this diagonal anymore is actually really critical, because it means you can't run to f1. Now notice you don't really want to run to h1, because otherwise knight takes f2 check is coming, and then the other knight is coming to h3, and that's not very pretty. Is that true, actually? Knight at h3, if you ran to h1, knight takes f2, king g1. Actually, it's just back here again. And the point is, if you go here again, knight at f1, 2 is checkmate, yeah. And if you take, then new knight at f3 check is powerful, and so on. You're in trouble if you go to h1, basically. So the move he missed was knight at h3. You could take it, but then knight at f3, pawn here takes, knight here, takes the queen, and you're actually covering everything. It's a very unclear position, let's say. But a much more interesting variation is if you don't take it and you go to f1. You think, well, what can black do to harm me? I'm going to get. And this is actually very pretty. So this shows that Crazyhouse can indeed be a draw, and this is how. You move your bishop to a6, check. He's only got queens and pawns, so he blocks. Okay, we check again with the bishop. And interestingly, he can't just block. Well, this is checkmate. So he actually has to block with the rook. Okay. You take the rook, and then you check him again. Come to e1. You've got a lot of knights. So you bring one of them in with check. Takes, takes. And if he goes back here, you check him again. And if you were to ever go here, we can go at f3 check. And if you were to go here, we can go at g2 check. Queen takes g2, f takes g2, king takes g2, and queen f3 checkmate. So he can't run to the king side. Well, what if he runs to the queen side? Then we can bring this other knight in. So knight takes f2, king here, knight here, check. If he tries to run up, well, if he tries not to run up, we force him to run up. And the moment he runs up, we got him. We check him here, we've got a rook in hand, remember. We bring the other knight in check, and the other knight in, and it's rook there, checkmate. So there's a way of dancing with your knights, and it's a checkmate in all lines. If you try to go here, there's a pawn and a back rank mate. If you try to go here, there's a rook at d3 check. This knight is protected, king d4, and again this knight comes in with checkmate. Okay, so it means that in this position he has to go back, check, go back, check. So it's a draw by repetition. So black, completely lost, actually has a brilliant draw with this move, knight at h3. Having said that, you could take, and it's a very unclear position where you lose your queen and it's just not clear. But kind of brilliant idea that neither side saw and no one would have seen necessarily without the introduction of engines. Instead, knight d6 was played, trying to stop mates. This is a complete crush at f7, bishop at h5. He just takes the queen. So the problem is there's a double threat here. He's threatening queen here with checkmate, but he's also threatening just simply queen takes knight and knight at g6 checkmate. So it's a double threat. And this bishop seems like an annoying move. He just takes the bishop, renewing both threats, renewing both this threat and this threat. This, he just takes it. And at this point, black resigned. Had enough. So that draw, PKR says, looks like the GSVC draw in the Crazyhouse League. It does, yeah. And we streamed that, I think, or did we? Not sure. Well, it will definitely be in the season highlights, that's for sure. Season 6 highlights of the Crazyhouse League. So that was a game between Murphy and Novak. Probably a correspondence game. And like I said, the source is probably this. Chesky by Paul Novak, 1990, where he discusses Murphy versus Novak. It's a match in 1990. And, well, you can see his own analysis. He also has this game Arno versus Galozzi in the AISE Postal, which I imagine is some kind of correspondence tournament. And yeah, I've put these games also in the study so we can have a look at them. So what was the key move in this position? It was move 20, knight at h3. I don't think he quite realized. How critical move 20 was when he wrote this article in 1990. Hola, corre contactos. Okay, so let us look at John McCallion So we're going to come back to this article. We've got some more stuff from this article later on. But let's just flip through a few more of these very early games from the 80s and 90s. So this is between John McCallion and Paul Yeru. Let's go a little bit quicker, maybe. Well, we'll see. We have the white castling, fianchetto castling, and then c4. Looks like why on earth would you sacrifice c4? Okay, so he wants to go queen takes c4, this sort of thing. But it's not strong. I mean, you're just giving away a pawn, and now at c2 is like a huge threat. Like, what is white doing? Like, before he played this move, he's completely fine, and then, so anyway, he's trying to remedy the situation, arguably, and he probably thought, I've got activity. Activity is worth a lot. Takes, and then again, he takes the bishop. The bishop is, protecting all the light squares around your king. So, yeah, the quality of these games is not high, but that's okay, because we can learn from low-quality games as well. Of course, Stockfish is brutal. It says just drop a pawn on g2. But okay, black played this. Queen takes pawn. Probably thought he was quite happy with himself taking a pawn. Ah, interesting. We're going to try and promote. Grabs a knight. Attacks the queen. f3. Okay. I mean, if you want to play a move like that, you go a pawn at f3. You don't move the pawn to f3. That creates so many weaknesses. Okay, so f3, he takes... Okay, so he attacks the queen. So notice what the threat is. We just take the queen. He just wants knight at h3, checkmate. Okay, have to say that. Bishop takes b1. Now, of course, this is an interesting move. And then this. And then you're both attacking the queen and threatening checkmate. Okay, that idea was missed. So just to show that idea, queen takes c6, takes here, you'd have to give up the queen, and that would be like a sample variation. So bishop g2 is the mistake in this line, but white's in trouble, and even this doesn't work because knight here check. You can't take, or queen at h1 is checkmate, and you can't sidestep because you get a smothered mate. I think that's just a very pretty example of a Crazyhouse mate. That's why I showed it. So instead, okay, he did this, f3. Okay, he stops the mate at least, takes the knight, and then he takes the queen. Takes back. Okay, so he's got two pieces for the queen. And notice he's promoting to a knight because you have to, according to these old rules, promote to a piece in the opponent's hand. Rook takes. At b7, rook f8, queen takes pawn, knight at d5, and queen a5. So queen a5 is a mistake because white's created too many holes around his king, and it's black to play and mate. Throw in a check, throw in another check, throw in another check, and checkmate. Taking doesn't help. And it's the same mate. Notice this is what I often call as the knight cube. These two knights, very powerful. And this dropping a pawn and then controlling the square with the knight, I often call the draw and push mate. You're drawing the king up, and then you're pushing him back, with the piece then controlling that square, which you drew him to. So, very nice. So white made obviously lots of mistakes. In fact, both sides made lots of mistakes. Too many weaknesses. Okay, so let's look at another game so John McCallion lost that game to Paul Yeru. Let's look at another game. This is from 1984 to 86. It was a correspondence game with Philip Cohen. And as I said, these are reproduced in the Variant Chess issue 58. So let me show you this Variant Chess 58. The article was published a long time ago in the Bulletin of Nost, was it? But it's only reproduced in 2008 in the Variant Chess magazine, and that's where you can find it online. And the link where you can find it is actually in this study, in the Lee Chess study of these historical games. So this is a game John McCallion against Philip Cohen. So I'll put that Novak game just a bit later. We've got these, because these are some very early games by John McCallion, correspondence games, which he played with his correspondence. Takes, and I should say that when the game was first played, they thought e4 d4 was just maybe this was refuted. This is a forced win for white because e4 d4, the white queen gets out, the white pieces are so active. You know, you got the bishops active, the queen active. The really early Crazyhouse players thought this is a forced win for white. And it's quite funny, you look at the Stockfish evaluation, mine is 1.8. It quite likes black. The reason is because the queen is so exposed that it can just be hit with tempo with all whites. Black can just develop with tempo. So yeah, I think they realised soon that this was not the case. I mean, even just from the games they played, that black clearly was doing quite nicely. Bishop e2. Now white bishop e2. I say planning at g5. Oh yes, so it's just trying to control the squares that the knight could possibly go to. So that knight, just trying to drive the knight straight back to g8. So why not? Why not go ahead with it? Yes, I see. So if we go ahead with it, so notice they're trying to play. It's interesting how they're trying to play very positional Crazyhouse. The plan is drive the queen off and then take this pawn. Very subtle. So c3, which is quite good. You're controlling the black knight and you're giving your queen a square to defend this pawn. So what's amusing about this is they're playing chess positional Crazyhouse, sort of moves that would be very, very smart in chess. But we know that the positional ideas in Crazyhouse are not the same as in chess. So you can see there's a sort of deep positional play that's going on that doesn't quite fit with the Crazyhouse ethos. Okay, so he gets in at g5 as he was planning, and knight g8. Okay, so quite nice play from white, just driving black's pieces back. Bishop e3. And the plan is knight d2 and castle queenside. He's not scared of those black pawns. Develops. He has to defend that weak pawn. Oh, nice idea from black. Of course, you don't want to take, or the knight comes and attacks your queen. So there's something rather nice about the way both are playing, even though Stockfish might not appreciate the creativity. And there's something about the style of this game so far. It's actually quite nice. I quite like it. Knight d4. I mean, there's a certain logic to it. It's not necessarily the best moves, but it's knight. Okay, so knight takes c3 would be natural, but he went for knight takes c6 first, hitting the queen, and then he's hoping for knight takes c3 next move. But black decides to keep on going. C takes b2, and white's going to keep on going. He's going to take the queen, so we're going to get a sharp position. Because white has got a queen in hand, it means black has got a queen, can take and get a queen on the back rank. So this is going to get sharp really quickly. Castles to try and get out of the way of everything. Seems reasonable. And rook takes knight. So black seems quite safe, and white safe provided this isn't a problem. And white's got a queen in hand as well, so maybe white's got a slight advantage in that sense. Queen takes pawn, and yeah, it feels like white's attack is a little bit faster just because of that. And John McCallion wrote, good chesky defensive players are probably born rather than made. In this variant, one must attack, and attack again. It should be worth saying that he was worried about queen takes b2, bishop takes c6, queen takes g7, knight at c2 check. But actually he was worried about bishop f6. What's bishop f6? I don't understand bishop f6, but this is what he was thinking. He was thinking, oh, the white queen is going to get trapped. It's just a queen. Any Crazyhouse player to say, it's just a queen, just sack it. But obviously he was a bit worried about his queen. So that's why he went straight for that queen. Okay, so bishop takes, okay, bishop takes e4. That's not such a good move. And at this point, yeah, these are correspondence players, and they calculate. And he just said, I calculated mate. I claimed my mate. So he basically writes down the mate. Queen takes rook. And the thing is, if bishop takes, you have knight at d6 and rook and queen checkmate. So you have to take with the king. And then he claimed I go queen at b8 check, and then pawn here check, and then I take this knight, and then I promote. Notice I can promote to queen since you have a queen in hand, and then I go knight here check, and then rook here check, and then queen here checkmate. So that's what he claimed the mate as follows, as I just showed. Stockfish says instead of going queen at b8, interestingly, you can actually go at c7 check first. The idea being if you take it, queen here check, and knight here is actually checkmate. That's a rather neat one. And if you try and run away, which also seems reasonable, you can just go knight d6 check. If you try and run away again, that was checkmate. And if you try and take it, then we need a queen this time. It's checkmate. So he didn't find the shortest mate, but he said this is just checkmate. So we're done. We're done with this game. So the third John McCallion correspondence game, again from these articles, also 1984 to 86. I said John McCallion thought this opening was potentially a forced win for white. Stockfish disagrees. He goes on to say, black played something I had not envisaged, so theory might eventually prove me wrong. Indeed. All comments and quotations are from John McCallion. Commentary reproduced in Nost's magazine Nostalgia issue 143, but as I said, I got it from this 2008. Knight c6, queen a4, knight f6, at d5, knight e5, bishop e3. What does it mean to be continued? Oh, so I think when I originally wrote this, I'm not quite sure what to be continued means. I think that's just me thinking when I was inputting the moves. I just said I need to get back to this one day, and then I did later. To be continued. Knight d2, knight d4. Okay, they love castling queenside, don't they? So he's thinking of casting queenside, but he hasn't done it yet. He still hasn't done it yet. But he loved these three bishops. He was a great fan, as white, so it was John McCallion, of these three bishops, bearing down on the black king. Queen e7, knight at f5, hitting the queen to d8, queen to h4, and he's just loving his position right here. And at this point, he said, I was so upset. I'm going to dig up the actual article. Knight f3. He was so upset when he saw this move land on the board. He said it's a lucky thing I didn't have a partner, because I'd have been a horrible person to live with. And because this is correspondence chess, he said, I'd have been a horrible person to live with for a whole week because of this move landing on the board, knight at f3. And what's funny is it's not a big deal. It's just a queen. You could even get another piece for it if you wanted to. Of course, they didn't realize that then. They thought queens were valuable. Knight d7 check. Just taking the knight back was actually just completely fine. You get two pieces for the queen, and the bishops are actually defending your king, so the queen can't really do anything. But he's desperate. He goes knight e7 check, king h8, bishop h6. I mean, nice idea. I mean, he's just going for it. It turns out the defensive move for black is just take this key knight. Here takes, and you don't have any pawns, so you can actually just take this bishop, and white's fine. I mean, black's fine. But instead, rook g8, and maybe this is white's last chance to really get, just to get an advantage doing something like this. Not quite the last chance, but he went bishop takes g7, rook takes g7, bishop takes f6. He's got lots of kind of nasty ideas on the black king. But at e2 check, and this is yeah. Again, knight takes f5 is strong from black. At e2 check is a slight mistake because white can just take with the bishop and he's completely safe always. Yeah, instead he took with the king, and now the white king is a bit open. Knight takes f5, bishop takes g7, knight takes. Okay, so notice with that move, taking with the knight, the black king is safe. This is the kind of thing where you think this is good, picking up the queen. No, queens aren't valuable. And it's now black's turn to counterattack. Rook d8 check. Oh, he even just takes the knight. Doesn't even go straight away with the counterattack. Black is so safe. Knight at h6, so he's going for a smothered mate. Okay, now black attacks. Knight d4 check, king back. He defends the mate. Again, white thought, I'm in a great position here. I'm going to go queen takes rook, king takes, and rook at f8, checkmate. And what he didn't realize is queen takes pawn check, block, queen takes rook check. White's got no pieces, so run. And at this point, he said he was thinking black would play this. And he was thinking he'd just be okay. But this move came and he, I think, resigned. Didn't have any blockers. And he resigned because you can block it, and check, you can block it. But black has a knight in hand, so that's checkmate. Or, if you don't block it, if you try and go for a runner, then there's just bishop. Remember, this is correspondence chess, so they can calculate this all. Bishop at d2, king takes knight, c5 check, king here, pawn here, checkmate. If you try going the other way, there's no other way. There's nothing else you can do. If here, just rook b4 is checkmate. So, yeah, let's look at his commentary now. Let's to that game. Let's see. Is it here or here? Quite nice little comments. Yeah, this is the one with the 3 knights. Okay, so let's just have a look. Because maybe I didn't get all the annotations. Yeah. Knight at f. So this is it. This is the position. Knight at f3. The first part of a beautiful 2-knight drop. Despite my regular lofty paeans to art and beauty before result, it is just as well that I'm a bachelor. I might have been very unpleasant to live with for the next few weeks. This is the drawback of playing correspondence chess, guys. G takes f3, knight at g2 check. I had no choice but to accept Paul's conditional continuation, with his fiendish cruelty still scurrying grouchily through my being, and the memory of the '84 US presidential election still fresh. I thought it would only be a case of making a few more fruitless moves as a chessic tribute to Walter Mondale, but how wrong I was. I completely underestimated my power to initiate a fierce counterattack, a sequence of moves that would leave us both breathless, and still to this moment bewildered. So, yeah, he gets a great counterattack, although, as I said, knight takes knight was the best. Bishop e3 to h6, the beginning of the fireworks. G takes h6, of course, allows. Bishop takes f6, followed by mate. Okay, I should have explained that. That when he went bishop here, yeah, taking this bishop is no good at all, because this bishop swings in. Bishop takes here, pawn here, and bishop there is checkmate. Forgot to emphasize that. Oh, knight takes f5 asks prepared to play bishop takes g7 check, whereupon knight takes g7 is best, which is answered by bishop takes f6, and over to you, dear reader. On 20, knight takes f5. Knight takes f5. he was wanting bishop takes g7, knight takes g7, bishop takes knight, and he thought, I'm in a great shape in this position. Yeah. Well, as you can see, Stockfish is just not impressed. But no, I mean it does look good for white. He's got a nasty pin on the king. He's got ideas of picking up a queen, although those would not be good ideas. I mean, yeah, but unfortunately, black can just do a simple move like bishop at h6, and there's nothing much going. We just did knight at f4. Oops, queen d2 is checkmate. Okay, so black has ideas of his own. It's not so simple. So let's read on. Anything else he says? Pawn at e2. With his usual modesty, believes that it was a simple oversight. I prefer to see it as a superb interposition, with the intention of drawing the white king to an unfavourable square for later variations. In any event, I was now so fascinated by the position that I wanted nothing but perfection for both sides. Nevertheless, it must have been a terrible chore for Paul to have to defend after such a seemingly successful attack. And this is a big mistake he took with the king. And this is, yeah, that's the end for white. He should have taken with the bishop and he would have been completely fine. And he thought he was fine even to the end. He just didn't realize he had no blockers. And he said he saw bishop at b4 check, c3, rook takes f8, e takes f8, his queen check blocks. And he was still hoping he was going to go for a mate. He just didn't see, look, there's so much material in hand. Black can force a lot here. So yeah, that was some fun correspondence games. This is the other set of correspondence games. Again, if you want to check these out, I haven't got links to them. If you want to pause and read, you're welcome. Yeah, he's talking. This is the other game where he's considering queen takes this and queen takes b2. Right. He decided not to go. Most of us do not allow pawn drops on the 1st or 8th rank. Nost appears to have allowed them to be dropped on the 1st rank, but I'm not sure what they were allowed to do when they got there. Yeah, like are they allowed to move 2 ranks and so on. So this is a correspondence game. They had to figure out what their rules were. I could well afford this precaution, even after capture of my knight, leaving a balance of 2 rooks and pawns for black against my extra queen. His exposed king would simply comply with my intentions. So this is the mate he found. So yeah, he got a nice win in this game. He declared mate. I now offer 2 possible conditional continuations, both of which were acknowledged without question. Okay. Oh, what's this? Oh, this is something else. I was seeing this position. I was going, what? This is something else. Proof games. Okay, so that's really cool. But we saw the Murphy-Novak game, and just a few more games now from something called the Hetero Chess Olympiad. Well, I'll give you actually one more postal game first. This is between Arno and Golazzi. Not very. Okay, so this was played, and they said if you want, this is a dubious move maybe, and they weren't sure about it. They're saying maybe what black should have played d6 if you want to refute this move, which makes sense. If you want to just go into a French, you just play d5, d4, and we get into the normal French that we've seen before. And then in the article I was reading, it went c5 exclamation mark. And they don't realise basically they're nasty queen g4 ideas. And takes, queen g4. It's quite good for white. But okay. And also just the weaknesses on c7 and d6. Okay, so this, bishop e5, here, takes, here, takes. And looks like black's winning a pawn. But it's not good. And why is it not good? It's not good because, oops, we have a check and we could win back something. I was thinking you could win back the bishop, but white had other ideas in this game of winning the pawn on b7. And that's actually a terrible mistake. I mean, this just deserves like a triple question mark. And black kind of saw the idea, but just messed up the move order. He played at f2, which doesn't work. King takes pawn, and then took the knight. And this doesn't work because now white has mate. Ugh. I mean, the way he has mate is king here, at g5 check, king takes pawn, bring the queen in, and checkmate. So that's a terrible mistake, going at f2 first and then queen takes knight. But what black does actually have a very strong continuation, and it's to take the knight first with check. I have to do everything with check in this game. Can't mess about. Then go at f2. And in fact, what the author didn't quite realize is actually much better than at f2 is bishop at f2. And this is true a lot, it's actually, because you get the bishop takes e3 if white doesn't take. Bishop at f2. If you don't take, bishop takes e3, and it kind of forces you to take, because otherwise you can't run back to c1 or to some kind of safety. Knight f5. The king actually can't run back because this bishop is cutting off the light squares. So you run forwards. Now the other bishop's cutting off the dark squares. There's just really nowhere to go. You have to even give your queen, and it's all checkmate. So queen takes c3 is just completely crushing it. It's a forced mate for black. But he messed it up by playing pawn first and then queen takes c3. And then white got a counterattack. And then white, instead of finishing off the mate, took the queen. Like, what? And now black's got mate. And this time he's not going to mess up. He gets the queen with check, and it's mate. And white resigns. So that's the kind of crazy stuff that happens. While we're on the subject of crazy stuff, this is from the first Hetero Chess Olympiad between Fais and Cassano. Like, what on earth are you doing playing the Queen's Gambit in Crazyhouse? You just lost a pawn, and black can replace the pawn on d5. But here goes. Like, white's getting crushed here, basically. But don't worry. Black plays f6. Oops. Ah, dear. I don't know. That's just a comedy. That's a comedy. Anyway, yeah, don't play f6 when your opponent's knight is on e5. It's not a good idea. Okay, more serious games hopefully, from the Hetero Chess Olympiad. I haven't actually seen these in a while, so hopefully they're more serious. I mean, look at the holes in black's position. Okay, he's just done for. And yeah, he's going to resign. He resigned after at f5. I mean, because the moment you move the bishop, you're going to get pawn at e6, and yeah, it's all over. That was between Novak representing Britain and Castelli representing Italy. So it's an Olympiad, because obviously people representing different countries. This is Czechoslovakia, Gyra against Fais for Canada. So it's Czechoslovakia against Canada, here goes. So yeah, interestingly, people say there has been a Crazyhouse Olympiad before. Isn't that incredible? It hadn't occurred to me. So there are plans in the pipeline for a Crazyhouse Olympiad. So yeah, there was in fact a Crazyhouse Olympiad before. This knight is not a very secure piece, so white looks like he's about to get crushed. The sack works. Queen takes knight works. Queen takes pawn. White is getting crushed here, and had the presence of mind to even just take this bishop, because you're getting two pieces for the queen, and the black king is safe. And white's going for a desperate counterattack. So who's going to win? Knight d4 check, bishop here check. He's going to go for some kind of mate. Oh, yep, that king is going to get caught. Yep, indeed it did. So black won, Canada won. So we saw Canada beat Cassano in a kind of almost comical way. This is an example of an early Crazyhouse puzzle. White to play and mate, and it's just this check. If you take here, we have the classic mate with queen and knight. And hi there, Methane Bro in the chat. We're looking at the history of Crazyhouse. Oh, I just messed it up. I just completely messed it up. So yeah, don't mess it up like me. So what was the move I messed up? trying to find it. Queen at f7. Yeah, delete that. Don't do queen at f7. Instead, go queen here, cutting off the king's escape. That's much nicer. And if the king goes here, we've got an easy mate. And if the king goes here, we've got the pretty mate with queen and knight. I was wanting to go queen here, knight here, queen here, and then I just suddenly noticed, oops, bishop defends. So he can't take the pawn, so he has to run up, but then we have this, and then another very classic mate. It's two diagonals mating. You can block and take. Yes. But actually this puzzle, early Crazyhouse puzzle, actually looks like this. And so this is a puzzle by someone called Donald Benge, and he was trying to say that Crazyhouse, obviously it's full of crazy sacrifices, and so this position looks like a normal kind of position. Actually, the white king doesn't look in very good shape, but actually white can win, is what he said. Because he just goes bam, bam. And king f8, because if you take the bishop, you are getting mated, he thought. And then you go at e7, and you take the bishop then, and then you're getting mated, and this is what we just saw. But it turns out that in this position, you don't have to take the bishop, you can take the pawn. And so as I said, the early Crazyhouse puzzle is actually an incorrect puzzle. Because if you take the pawn, well, there's nothing. The king's actually running away to safety. Nothing you can do. So yeah. So one of the first Crazyhouse puzzles that was published, queen takes pawn, leads to checkmate. Actually, it doesn't. It's rather unfortunate. Okay, so that concludes this little summary of Crazyhouse. So we've seen for anything modern, I'd say check out Jan Lee's YouTube and check out the ZHS blog. Follow the ZHS blog; it'd be cool. Follow Jan Lee's YouTube. Follow my own YouTube. That'd be a nice thing to do. Follow Jan Lee. Follow Mugwort Crazy. Basically, go to the blog and you'll get lots of information. In fact, go to my YouTube and there are playlists, and you can get from the playlists you can find lots of other people. Look for Clearcast Chess. Look for Mugwort. Look for obviously Jan Lee is obviously the champion, or the ex-champion, and he's actually going head to head. So history is being made, not this Sunday, but next Sunday. Not next Sunday. Next Saturday, at midday UTC. So you have to work out that's probably 11 p.m. Australian time, or 2 p.m. Central European time. So Jan Lee will be facing off against International Master Opperweisen for the 2019 Bullet Crazyhouse World Championship. If you want more about the normal Crazyhouse World Championship, there's lots of information about each round in 2018, really detailed stuff, lots of puzzles and stuff. So do check out the blog. Hopefully there'll be a History of Crazyhouse blog appearing here one day. This is just, maybe it will just be this video. And as I said, if you want to improve at Crazyhouse, I should also add there's a what is Crazyhouse? Just a simple guide and a guide to getting better at Crazyhouse on the blog, and there are lots of great links there. Where is the guide to Crazyhouse? So there's a link to the Crosskeys guide. There's some basic ideas, and then the other thing is this, which everyone recommends, is this article by Master Tan on light and dark squares. It's a very fundamental idea in chess, but especially in Crazyhouse, understanding the color complex on which you should attack your opponent. So yeah, I recommend people check out this. This is a very important blog by Master Tan. I'm not going to read through it. That's something for people to check out. This is not history. It's more like yeah. But Master Tan is a great player, also from Australia, who was one of the candidates in 2018. Oh yeah, I should say a few more things. So where to play Crazyhouse, as well as leechess.org. You can play on chess.com. You can play on Fix, the free internet chess server. But you can also play on chessvariants.training site. And there you can also train puzzles, not only in Crazyhouse, but in other variants like Atomic. And you can also play variant 960 on this website. And you can also submit puzzles. So that's cool. And the other site which I wanted to recommend, chessvariants.training, also I want to recommend is pychessvariants.herokuap.com. So where you can also play not only Crazyhouse, but sort of variants of Crazyhouse like Kappa House, or I mean, someone's playing something I don't even know what it is, Shang-Chi, right now. If you create a new game, you can play any of these variants: Makruk, Cambodian, Situan, Placement, Crazyhouse, Standard, Shogi, Mini Shogi, Shang-Chi, Capablanca, Serawan. Kappa House is the one I'd love to get into. S-House, Grand House, Gothic, and Goth House. So house means you have pieces you take go into your pockets. So that's nice. And you can choose, actually you want chess 960 by clicking 960 and it'll jumble the pieces on your side of the board. On both sides of the board rather, yeah. So this is also a wonderful site. Hopefully you can see it on your screens, PY Chess Variants. Okay, so I think I've talked about everything I wanted to talk about. So I think that's it. There's something I might conclude with if people are interested, and that is I might read to you an article by Alex Randolph, but I don't want to bore you, so I'd say this is like the end of the history, and then just a nice article. If you're falling asleep, this will just put you to sleep, basically. Oh yeah, follow ZH Chess Instagram. That's, I don't know if I'll post regularly, but that's something that'll be cool. Oh, and also on Lee Chess, there's a nice just introduction to how to play. John Bartholomew has also got YouTube videos introducing you how to play, and then Chess Network. It's got some just nice videos introducing you how to play, as well as all the things I told you already about Master Tan, Grosky, and so on. Okay, do is I'll just put, what I'll do, I know what I'll do. I'm going to put Lee Chess TV on while because that's live history, right? Put some live history on. You can watch some Sharkmeister against Carney H, and then while you were watching it, I'm going to read to you an article by Alex Randolph called Homo Ordinator. But the original is written in Italian, so if it's slightly clumsy English, it's because it's just a clumsy translation. Okay, so this was at a meeting called of Board Game Studies, which is a group of people from the most diverse disciplines: history, archaeology, mathematics, journalism, sociology, psychologistics, ethnology, etc., who in the common interest for the subject of games came together annually to discuss their latest research in this field. The 1999 study week took place in Florence, and the opening conference was held by Alex Randolph, who, in his very personal way, explained why man plays. And this is a transcript of that conference. My purpose in this report is to touch on some aspects of board games that are often overlooked, and also perhaps to highlight some points of view that seem to me related, but that are only rarely or perhaps never discussed in relation to games. To begin with, I would like to say that after so many years of almost continuous involvement with them, board games have not yet finished to amaze me, and I continue to amaze myself since their existence. Why are they there? And why is that? Since when? These small, orderly, autonomous systems, apparently self-sufficient, which we can or cannot enter at our pleasure, which do not have the slightest useful purpose, but have all the power from time to time to detach ourselves and perhaps absorb us more than anything else in our lives. turn the sound. Oh, didn't mean to do that. I'm going to turn the sound just a little bit down because it's quite loud. But we can say at least this. I think they are all systems of confrontation. They're all systems of getting to grips with pretend conflicts. Taken for the most part, nice mate there, taken for the most part from real life, but drastically simplified, and from which all unpleasant and disorderly characteristics have been removed. Only the fun part can remain, and so without danger and quite certain that nothing will happen to us as a spy, we can fight, or rather simulate to do so, hoping always, of course, to do our best, and at the same time to satisfy two of our deep and contradictory social stimuli. One to be together, the other to confront each other. But what is a board game? What characteristics should it have? First of all, I would say it must have an identity, therefore a name, and also some recognizable physical traits, although neither of these is absolutely essential since they can be replaced, while absolutely essential to the existence of a game are its rules. I would say, in fact, that a game and its rules are the same thing, that the rules are the game and vice versa. As we prepare to play a game, we declare that we accept the rules, which in return must tell us precisely, mind what we want to know, that is, how to play, what is allowed and what is not, and what we must do to win. Years ago I wrote the marginalia of my old Homo Ludens to distinguish between games and other ways of playing. Quote, if a game activity has rules that cannot be transgressed, and if its purpose apart from mere entertainment is to generate a winner, it is a game. Otherwise, not. This applies, of course, to all games, including the other type that perhaps we shouldn't even mention here, life-size games that we play with our bodies and generally with the help of a ball or something equivalent to focus on, such as football, golf, table tennis, and so on. The two types have a lot in common, but in truth they are worlds apart, and the differences are so big and obvious that I wouldn't even mention them. If it weren't for the clear paradox they generate, the appeal of board games is that they are miniatures, by definition small enough to be placed on a table, which means that we play them with our mind and not physically with our bodies. And here lies the paradox. Life-size games are narrowly limited by the size and scope of our bodies, and ultimately by how far we can see, while there are no such limits for board games. Without the slightest difficulty, we accept that the board represents an entire battlefield, or the whole of Europe, or the whole universe, or, instead, some fantastic chimera, a labyrinth in which hungry minotaurs wander from whom we have to run away, and where we, of course, are not ourselves, but our pieces. Because there is always in board games this curious duality between ourselves and our pieces, we are both inside and outside the game. There is a Lilliput level, when we feel and almost believe we are inside, and a Gulliver level, when from outside and from above we handle the pieces and move them here and there. Getting ready to play a game is somehow like getting ready for a nice lunch. There is the same kind of joyful anticipation, as long as the players are really hungry, that is, to say they have a burning desire to win. The desire to win is the fuel that drives the game forward. If a player is indifferent or distracted and doesn't care about winning or losing, the game will lose its energy and become boring, which for a game is worse than death. The golden rule is, if you don't want to win, don't play. Playing is a voluntary activity. Therefore, to survive, a game must be loved. There is really no other criterion of judgment. But what does it have to contain to be loved? What are the minimum requirements? I would say tenacity, surprise, a smooth flow, in addition to some identifiable and, if possible, inexhaustible elements of fun, such as going up and down in snakes and ladders, which is what will make it live forever. But what about games at a higher level of depth and complexity? They too must be loved in order to survive. and not everyone finds depth and complexity particularly amiable. But I can think of at least one element that makes all these games, if not unlovable, at least very attractive, namely, that the deeper and more complex they are, the more players are encouraged to intervene to make decisions that affect their course. At the highest level, players might think, and rightly so I think, that they make the game themselves while it's taking place. There's a famous cartoon of two chess players so deeply immersed in their game that they don't notice a war taking place around them. By the way, there's also a movie on exactly that theme called The Chess Players, so I recommend that to you. Set in Bangladesh. No, set in British India, at the time when India was being taken over by the British. What I like best about this cartoon is that it is only slightly exaggerated. If instead of the war, the scene had been a crowded coffee side with loud conversations and a loudspeaker all around, we would have found their absorption quite normal, and they, of course, would not have noticed the difference. The fact is that the phenomenon is by no means uncommon, and that the game on the table could not be chess, might not be chess. Today, there are a fair number of remarkable games, so meaning there are many interesting games as well as chess. Some for 4 or more players, requiring concentration so deep that it can easily induce in each a state of trance. You can hear it coming as we play. There's a sudden change of heart. A cloud of silence falls on the board. No more jokes, no more courtesies. All faces terribly serious, our eyes nailed to the board. And suddenly it happens. Suddenly we are totally isolated. We may still vaguely perceive some noises and movements around us, but we no longer record them. It doesn't matter anymore, except what happens or is about to happen on the board. We are enchanted, which is probably sorry, it's got cut off, which is probably exactly what we seem, as if touched by a magic wand. Huizinga was the first, I think, to observe and describe this phenomena. Less so in the first chapter of his famous book. He calls it an exit from ordinary life. In the English version, which he wrote himself, he uses such appropriate words as seizure brackets enchantment, and rapture brackets ecstasy. There are, of course, other circumstances in life in which we experience very similar moments of extreme concentration and detachment from our surroundings. When, for example, we feel a sudden need to put something in writing before it has lost its freshness, or we feel we are on the verge of resolving a problem, or simply when we are deeply absorbed in reading. But if these are experiences we live alone, in board games we can live them together with others. In short, I often have the feeling that in the whole of civilization there is nothing more curious and intriguing than a board game. Even more remarkable, it is certainly the fact that board games have appeared independent, often many times throughout history, as part of cultures that flourished separately and independently, often thousands of miles apart, or centuries apart, in the case of overlapping cultures. There is much evidence in this regard. Probably the most obvious example is a little less than 500 years ago, was the discovery by groups of adventurers of the 2 Native American cultures, which flourished for centuries in complete isolation. As we all know, both were deliberately destroyed. These disasters have happened many times over the centuries, but nevertheless it is difficult to think about them without an element of pain. Anyway, it is strange and particularly exciting for us that in what little time has survived in both regions, there is a certain number of board games, some of which are in some form still played today. So it is hard not to conclude that there must be a predetermination in us that inevitably generates culture, and with it board games, when conditions are favourable, and especially when at least part of the population can enjoy free time. But if it is true that cultures can develop separately and at different times, then this potential must have been with us from the beginning, before the initial human group began to disperse, we took it with us without realizing it for many thousands of years until it finally happened, the opportunity here and there to flourish. But a potential for what, and for what purpose? Certainly not because of what actually resulted. There is no foresight in nature, and so we can only ask ourselves questions, because we know almost nothing about our remote past, and perhaps not even that. However, today we can at least say with some confidence that more or less 100,000 years ago, that is to say quite recently in geological terms, after a series of false starts, finally appeared this weak creature, naked and defenseless, without claws, fangs, or fur, very miserable in appearance compared to a bear or a tiger, but in possession of something so new and powerful that in a geological moment has conquered and populated the whole world, has changed its appearance, and now could even destroy it. That something was, of course, our huge brain. There has never been such a thing in the 3.5 billion years that we are told it took life to reach its present state. Some other attributes were still missing to complete us, such as the opposable thumb and the special vocal cords that allow us to speak, but nothing comparable to our brain, which has given us, among other things, consciousness, and with it the awareness of our death, which has made us human. I would like to propose a hypothesis that this oval-sized brain, to be able to function, had to impose a certain number of compulsions on us, one of which is very evident, and it is the need to make order, or perhaps, which is more or less the same thing, the terror of chaos, leading us to believe that by making order we could keep it at bay, chaos at bay, but that by relaxing, even for a moment, chaos would again take over. In any case, our daily need to make order is sufficiently visible. It is this constant need that we have to straighten out, to put things in their place, to tidy up, to sort out, to catalogue. We are creatures that make order, whether we like it or not. Other creatures have other characteristics. Ours is to make order. On the contrary, tidying up can be so strangely satisfying, as even the most disordered among us know well, because on those rare occasions when we put our things in order, afterwards we are surprised how pleased and relieved we feel. But this material tidying up is just a side effect. The truly wonderful thing is that this same need allows us to reason, to think in an orderly manner, one thing after another, and thus to arrive at solutions to problems that we happen to have to face, banal or deep, but also to mental tasks that we have deliberately given ourselves for our amusement. The process is the same. In truth, the brain also has other ways of solving problems, of which we are completely unconscious. Without warning, we can suddenly find ourselves with a good and ready solution, without knowing how it happened, a flash of intuition, while instead we are perfectly aware of what happens when we think. Children often reason out loud, counting their steps on their fingers. We have this ease of focusing our attention. We choose a topic that interests us, we remove what is not essential from it, then we reassemble what remains in a model or sequence that is new and that means something. I have a recurring vision of something that has been told to me, or that I have read somewhere, or perhaps only dreamed of, but in any case, long ago, a child on the beach, barely able to walk, is holding pebbles in his hand, and with great concentration aligns them in a line. That's all, the end of the vision. There really is nothing else. I think what fascinates me so much is that the child is proving to be a human being. What he is doing, first of all, is intentional. It is a game, but clearly significant, which perhaps can always be said of a game, and it is rational, and therefore ordered. Somehow I feel that it is the beginning of all that is truly human, and so ultimately of the highest human accomplishments, and especially of those that I consider most valuable, because they have no purpose outside themselves. They are themselves their purpose. Poetry, art, music, storytelling, pure mathematics, pure science, philosophy. All are luxuries of the spirit. Luxuries are the things that delight us, that we yearn to possess, but that we can do without. They are not concrete. There is no need for our survival. What about board games? Board games are also luxuries, of course, although minor and marginal, but in the sense of non-utility they are perhaps the purest. But they belong to a different order of things. They are ephemeral. At the end of a game there is nothing tangible, like a poem or a theorem. At the end of a game there is nothing. Unless the game is transcribed, of course, in which case it becomes a document. There are entire libraries filled with nothing but chess books, thousands and thousands of brilliant chess games, but now lifeless and buried in books. They cannot be significantly compared to current chess games which are alive and taking place somewhere right now. The category closest to the game is perhaps storytelling. Even games are ordered reproductions of life. Events carefully selected and organized in sequence, very similar to the child's pebbles on the beach. There is the unfolding of a story, or in a more complex narrative, there can be intertwined the unfolding of multiple stories. Artificial scenarios in which things happen, but there are two fundamental elements that keep the games completely separate from the objects or from any of our other experiences. One is uncertainty. We don't need to know what's going to happen. This is the essence of our enjoyment in a game. As well as in a real life, from which it is directly and voluntarily taken, uncertainty is the key to what makes the game non-repeatable, never twice the same. It is also what we call suspense. It means to fear something imminent without knowing what. Of course, a tremendous suspense can also be enjoyed in a story, but only once, only the first time. And even that first time when we cry without shame watching a movie, or we are awake all night, unable to half down a book, some hidden part of us knows very well that what fascinates us in this way is not happening now, that the film was made last year and that the book was written 100 years ago. While when we are about to play a game, the game is still in the future. It has not yet begun to exist. Again, the second time we read a story, we can enjoy it much more than the first, and that's almost certain if it's a good story. But nothing in the world will impress us to know how that story will end. While a game, like real life, no one knows how it will end. And the other element is justice. In a game, there has to be justice. Other minds have no sense. If other minds have no meaning, it's not a game. Who would think to participate in a game that they don't think to be fair? But in real life, we do not have this choice. In us there is a deep sense of justice, which I think is innate. The first time they say that something is not worthwhile, that is also the moment when they become aware of injustice, of the humiliating inequalities of life, and that this story that we have all been created equal is truly an atrocious joke. Social inequalities, but also inequalities in our appearance, in our abilities, in our natural talents. We learn to adapt. We are told to do our best, and we do it. But we never cease to crave for justice. I am convinced that this is what attracts us so powerfully to the game, that it makes games so necessary for us, and makes us love them so much. We know, though never say, that games are the only place in life where justice is certain, because they are the only place where justice is needed. A need, by the way, that is also clearly reflected in the boards of our games, in their almost maniacal regularity. Whether they are works of art or just scratches on a stone, they seem to shout out their fairness, and that's what makes them recognizable. An archaeologist discovers an artifact and immediately feels that it must be the board of an unknown game. It's a game, he says to his friends and assistants, but of course it's not. To our misfortune, what he has escaped are the vestiges of a game, proof that once there was a game, but the game itself has gone. Since the rules have gone, and almost certainly will never be found, because they were never written. The people who played that game knew the rules, and why would they have to write them down? But fortunately, in some cases, the oral transmission line hasn't been interrupted, and we have in fact a fair number of descendants of the ancient games. Although, with the sole exception of Go, as far as I know, all the original games have long since disappeared. A curious fact about these games is that almost all of them are either war games or hunting games, in which our main pleasure comes from either chasing or escaping the pieces of other players. But those who created those original games had to belong to a privileged class of warriors who were not forced to work and therefore had time to play. And since in life what they liked most was to wage war and hunt animals, or occasionally men, it's not surprising that those were the pleasures they tried to reproduce for their own enjoyment. But war games and hunting games are so deeply defective that we really have to think that they are different species, or addition of different genre, with little in common except being board games. War games are always strategy games for two people. Hunting games always need an engine, a random generator of some kind, dice, or shells, or other, without which they cannot go on. In some of the older and more interesting hunting games, the players have different pieces, which means that after each shot they have a choice and can make a decision. But more fascinating to me from the point of view of the pleasure factor, which as you may have noticed is what interests me the most, are the games of pure luck, in which we have only one piece with which we can completely identify, but over which we have neither power nor any form of control. We're completely helpless, which is precisely what I think we like best. You have no responsibility. All we can do is look anxiously and shout when an enemy piece is healing us, is heading towards us and getting closer. We need a 3. What's that mean? We need a 3 to achieve security. This is a dice game. Give me a 3, we implore loudly. Please give me a 3. But there comes a 1, and so curses and punches on the table. The exact opposite of what happens in a classic war game. Here, there are no contraptions that make the game go on. What moves the game is the minds of the players, who are silent, composed, their eyes fixed on the board. What are they thinking about? Mostly, I think, everyone is asking themselves, what's causing the other one? What's motivating the other one? What's moving the other one? Which is the essence of a game of pure strategy. We play according to the other player, what we think is going through his mind. The result is an inner monologue on both sides of the board, and explains, incidentally, why these games can only be for 2 players. Anyway, if I do this, he does that, then I get this, and he gets that, I get, but what if he doesn't? Better to think about it again. Very different in a strategy game is also our attitude towards the pieces. We don't identify with them, but somehow we suffer life in them, or at least some of us do. Especially in games like chess, where the pieces have different powers. A bishop on the table is nothing, a piece of wood, but put on a chessboard, it immediately seems to be filled with the desire to move, to go into its crazy, oblique street. But bishops are relatively recent in chess. Instead, in all classic forms of chess, there was always a line of soldiers walking in front of the noble pieces in the back, humble pedestrians that were always ready to move forward so that they are not mistaken or sacrificed for a minimal advantage. Although we know that each of them has within themselves the power to one day be promoted and become a greater piece, a metamorphosis that in Western chess can be particularly devastating. We can almost see our modest pawns grow and swell in importance when they threaten promotion. An advanced pedestrian approaching the 8th line looks like Genghis Khan. But the closest to life of all chess pieces is, of course, the horse. As a child, I had a real passion for this piece, which I have always called the horse, because it is what it looks like. Wherever I saw a surface of boxes in a wall or floor, I immediately imagined a move by the horse. I liked his transgression, is not staying in the ranks, and is always landing in a box of the other colour. I also sympathised with the reputation he had of not being a very strong piece, although, as we all know, in good hands even a horse can sow terror, especially if firmly placed in the middle. Nimzovich said that a protected horse in the centre is like a thorn in the throat of the opponent. But one cannot speak of ancient games without at least mentioning the Mancala games, a multitude of closely related games which are played by millions of people in Africa and elsewhere, but are almost completely unknown in the West. It is a bit embarrassing for me to deal with this subject, knowing that some of you are authorities in the field. However, I would like to use this unique opportunity to make 2 brief comments on these games, from a point of view that is not the usual and that you might find interesting, or so I hope. Nothing has been said more often about Mancalas than that they are pure calculation games. And I am, of course. Taken individually, the calculations aren't difficult, since they only involve small numbers, and the process is mainly made up of counting. What makes things difficult is that the numbers change with every move, changes that need to be followed closely and remembered, which in the long run can be quite exhausting and not particularly fun, especially for those who are not meant for this kind of thing. In case of need, we do not think that the arithmetic isn't very amusing. Attempts to introduce games based on arithmetic have always failed miserably. Children hate them and refuse to play them. So my first comment concerns the fact that entire populations love these pure computing games. This means that there must be, in all of them, some particular attractive and captivating features, in no way related to the mental efforts that the games require, something that is pure fun. And this, I suggest, is Mancala's unique gesture, to collect all the seeds from one of the holes and sow them one by one in adjacent holes around the board. A very pleasant gesture, and also very elegant, and that everyone can enjoy regardless of his level of play, from the wizards of calculation up to the younger children who may not even know what they're doing, but they've already discovered that it's fun, and in fact it's irresistible, I find. And since it is present in all the variations of the Mancala without exception, the gesture itself must be very old, so much so as to go back in time perhaps to the origins of the game, 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. The second comment I want to make is about multiple turns in Mancalas, especially the complex ones, which are numerous. In multi-turn games, the last seed does not end the move unless under certain conditions. For example, if it ends up in an empty hole, or in a hole that contains a particular number of seeds. Otherwise the move continues. All the seeds in the last hole are collected again, and semi-born again. A process that can be repeated several times. These long moves are fun to make, but frighteningly difficult to cast in advance, to predict in advance. And so the question is, would that be possible, and would it be sensible and enjoyable? In my opinion, yes. And the reason is that in all Mancala games, since the starting hole is chosen and all its seeds have been collected, the rest of the move is inexorably determined, and this regardless of whether the move is rational or the result of an intuition. After that, it is only a matter of watching the move make its course, which is in any case interesting, as if I followed the descent of a ball into a pinball machine, bouncing from ring to ring, until it ends up in the hole for which it was intended. My suspicion is that the most complex Mancala games are most often played in this way, that is, intuitively. Incidentally, to return to the gesture, 2 years ago, I saw the masters of Bari Dar, Antigua, what does that mean, playing at the Mind Sports Olympiad in London, and I was pleased to note that even these great players not only enjoyed the gesture of the Mancala, but clearly enjoyed showing how smoothly, quickly, and accurately they could make it. But the pleasure of a particular gesture can also be had in many other games, though perhaps not so intensely. Just sliding a piece along the entire length of the board, for example, can be enjoyable, or making tricks in checkers, overtaking opposing pieces, particularly long multiple tricks on 10 by 10 boards, or properly setting up the pieces in Go, holding them between the index and middle finger and then beating them sharply on the board with a nice click, or simply the various gestures from which we can choose to roll the dice. The die is cast, says the beloved commander, as he was about to cross that river, actually just a stream, thus changing the course of history. But in his language he really said, the die is thrown, which must mean at least that in Roman times dice were thrown with a certain violence. But nothing compares to when we play craps in America and even throw dice against a wall. That explains why American dice have sharp edges and angles. They don't roll too much after hitting the wall, while European dice have rounded corners and vertices, which allows them to roll or be poured from a little can't remember what it's called. Fascinating little objects are symbols of the unpredictable. When I see dice on a table, I find it hard not to pick them up and throw them at least once and then be interested in the result. 11, but why 11? Couldn't it have been some other number? And if not, at what point did it become an 11? When the dice were still in the air, or when they landed but hadn't yet stopped? Or was it before the launch, when they were still in my hand? Or long before that, long, long before that, to the beginning of time? I wonder how many philosophers throughout history have used dice to illustrate these ancient and harassing questions. They tell me that I must conclude. But before you do that, just one more word about the dice and those harassing questions, something most of you might not know, and that's how Japanese gamblers roll their dice. Our way when we gamble is to first place our bets and then roll the dice, but that's not how it's done in Japan. In Japan, the dice are shaken in a, what's it called? The little thing which you shake dice in, which is then quickly knocked over on the board so as to trap the dice under it. Only then are the bets made. But my question is this: is the result hidden, or is it still in the future? And now, instead of a conclusion that after such a disorganized speech it would make little sense to make, I would like to end with a proposal. When we say play play of board is given to the word board. When we say board game, the word board means table. So board games would all be games that are played on a table, because it seems a bit strange and arbitrary to exclude. When we say board games, we seem to be saying tables, so the board games would be all games that are played on a table, because it seems a bit strange and arbitrary to exclude games like domino, mahjong, and other card games just because they are not played directly on a table. And then the card games, of course. Sorry, the translation is a bit funny here. And then there are card games, of course. There's never been a game system more ingenious, efficient, economical, and versatile than a deck of cards. I find it hilarious to know, when I put a normal deck of playing cards in my pocket, that I'm carrying 50 or more of the best games I've ever invented. In any case, my proposal would make it much easier to define what a table game is. It is a game that is played sitting around a table, or in other words, around another space, a tatami, a carpet, or other. This clear definition would be practical and useful, I think, especially in view of today's extraordinary proliferation of games that are played in front of a screen. More and more of these games are of high quality and are obviously fascinating, especially for young people, so much so that there are those who fear that they will soon eliminate all other games and have the whole field for themselves. But I have to say, I don't have those fears. I don't think that board games are in danger at all, certainly not the best ones. But my attitude has little to do with quality. I just think that as long as there are tables and people who like the conviviality of sitting around them, there will be games to play on those tables. And there ends the little talk given by Alex Randolph called Homo Ordinator, which is man in the wake of the computer. And obviously with Crazyhouse and playing on Lichess we see sort of a great opportunity for the well, we don't have the conviviality of playing it around the board, but we're playing an ancient board game reinvented in the form of Crazyhouse, which is very convenient um, for the age of computers because of the ease of just switching the color, and the great view we can have of the whole board in 2 dimensions. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this little introduction to the history of Crazyhouse and this little philosophical musing about games from Alex Randolph, who, if not invented Crazyhouse, who reinvented Crazyhouse in the 70s. Oh, there's been a raid. Oh wow. Uh, cool. That's very kind of you, Nick Dice. We were talking about you earlier on the stream because you're part of the history of Crazyhouse, so it's very fitting that you should raid us. Um, and the question now becomes, who should we raid? So, yeah, if I just quickly, Black is about to die there. Yeah, let's see. Photo chess, Kryptone, he's not playing chess. Okay. Okay. Let's raid Photo chess. She's taking some nice photos from Isle of Man. And yeah, thanks again everyone for joining me. I know it's very late at night, but hopefully it's been a fun stream. And do check out my YouTube, and where you can where I will also upload this video later. Bye everyone.